Welcome, adventurers! You've made it to the Wind Down, the live stream at the end of the Geekverse. It's a chill place to hang out here as the sun sets on another day. We're here to have a little chat, reflect on the day's successes, and prepare for a better tomorrow. So settle in with your favorite beverage this evening.
May I tempt you with a cup of chamomile?
Why, thank you, Dory. I would love a mug of tea this evening, but perhaps you would rather have some coffee, though I do recommend decaf this late in the evening. Or perhaps maybe a cold brew is more your style.
Oh, no thank you, Dory. A little red wine. For me, I think.
Sounds like an excellent choice, Gandalf. Whatever you want, it's yours. Could I offer you a bourbon, a martini, an old-fashioned, or something perhaps a little stronger? Ugh. Well, I mean, if that's really your thing, then okay, but I hope we can find something a bit better than that.
Romulan ale. Why, Bones, you know this is illegal.
I only use it for medicinal purposes.
All right, now we're talking. I'm Heath, and I'll be your host. Welcome to my home. Come one, come all, writers, artists, sculptors, storytellers, board gamers, streamers, dungeon masters, fans of sci-fi, fantasy, geeks of all kinds. Whatever your fandom, you have a place here. For soon it will be time for another long rest so that we can recover our hit points, our spells, and our abilities, so we'll be ready to fight on for another day tomorrow. But first, we all need a little time to reflect. Because you've survived another long, perilous day of wilderness treks, dungeoneering, and random encounters. And that's worth celebrating. Let's tell the tale. It's time for the Wind Down. It will improve your life. It really will. Give it a chance. Here we go. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another unscheduled Wind Down. We've had some more breaking news, and I said that I would come in and talk about it and be live again if the release came. So we were kind of looking for it, and here it is. It dropped. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it all afternoon, so I didn't get writing and other creative activities done. So I instead was organizing thoughts and pulling together people to discuss this. So here we are. I also have Marc with us. Marc, say hello.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me on the show again, Heath. I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm delighted to have you, so we can have this be a little bit more of a discussion between us and then also with the chat as well. I see we got 90 people here already. I was just looking at there's comments going by and everything going by already. So lots of discussion here. So thank you everybody for being here. This is great. It's so great to see everybody. So what we're going to do is try to. I want to go through everything as systematically as possible. Oh, and by the way, I've got the Discord server up. I'm going to have the channel for the Wind Down up. So if you need to send us something that you can't send through the chat, then I've got the Wind Down channel up over here, so we can put this over here. So yes, Marc, Open DnD, Piano TM. He's one of the regulars. Oh, we see Piano here. Open DnD. Good to have you here. Jeremy says, thank you for streaming. I appreciate your work. Yeah, and we were going to say that. Ordinarily, we're talking about making RPGs and rules and other games and tabletop stuff and things like that here on the channel. And I know there has been a lot of stuff about the OGL here lately. And I also know that I put out a bunch of videos because I've been clipping the stuff, like with our interview with Ryan Dancy and then with Bob Tarantino, because I think this information was important. And I didn't want to keep it till next week or whatever. So today and tomorrow, the rest of the clips, or tomorrow, the rest of the clips from the Bob Tarantino interview will come out. I think that's important info. It's clipped by subject. So if you need to look for something targeted that he said, it's there. That's why I'm doing it. I know some people are in the comments were like, stop posting all this stuff. Stop talking about this. But we did the interview. It needs to be clipped. So Harun is here. Positive Fandom. Positive Fandom is one of our allies. I know she was talking about this on her channel last Sunday. So thank you very much for helping to get the word out. We should say, I'll let you describe what's going on, Marc, but we should say Marc runs Mechanical Muse. He does he has published the World of Atultus. So here's one of his books right here. And he is a sponsor of the Morning Grind, our morning show, Mechanical Muse is. So we should say that here in the beginning. But Mark, do you want to talk about what is going on with your RPG products now and what's going on with your RPG development?
Yeah, I mean, for us, I mean, first off, we're heavily affected by everything that's been coming out, right? Because we've been working on this. Our books came out a year ago, October, and when we got the news about the changes, it kind of took us just we're blown away. We did not know what we were going to do or whether we were even going to be able to keep selling our books. We're still not 100% sure, but feeling a little better. But we'll see how that all turns out. But what we are doing in the meantime is we wanted to do the sort of positive things that gamers are all about, which is coming together to make something that's really cool and magical. And so we're doing something called Cool Name Goes Here RPG, which is we've got a bunch of amazing consulting designers like Matt Forbeck, who wrote the new Marvel RPG, Owen Casey Stevens, who worked on the Star Wars saga game, the Starfinder, Steve Long of Hero fame, and a bunch of other amazing folks helping us to build a new system that we're going to give away to the world when we're done. Because we figure that's how gamers work. We should show folks what we're really about, the good parts of us. So that's what we're working on right now. But yeah, all of this is, of course, very important to us as a business and me personally.
The link is in the ticker down below, but I just realized I should also put it in the description. So cool name goes here. No, Cool Name RPG.
Yep, coolnamerpg.com is the easiest way to remember it.
Okay.
The game right now is called Cool Name Goes Here because we're going to let everyone weigh in on what we call it. That's going to be part of this development process. So I see someone said that it's the best name ever, and more people are like falling in love with it. I won't be surprised if by the time we're done, we end up being like, no, we're just keeping it. We like that one. So
Lou is a proponent of that as well. So okay, so that's in the chat. That's in the ticker, but then also in the description. In the description, you will find a link to the Discord server. So the Discord server, I saw Stray put it in the chat, so thank you so much for that. But down in the description is the server invite, the link to the Cool Name RPG website, and then also links to the full live streams that we did with Ryan Dancy. And Ryan Dancy was the vice president of the Dungeons and Dragons brand at Wizards of the Coast when the OGL was formulated, and he was the business visionary behind that. And that was an excellent discussion. That one, when all this confusion came up, I had two questions. That was, okay, so wait a minute. Is the OGL not what we intended it to be? Was it not intended to be what we all thought it was? That was my first question. And with my conversations with Ryan, I came to the conclusion that it was. That the intention of what was designed there is what we all thought it was. But then my question is, okay, is it actually what we thought it was? Either because of a mistake or something else that it might not have been. But then after my conversations with Bob Tarantino and even going through his dissertation and everything like that, Bob Tarantino is an entertainment attorney in Toronto, and he did his PhD dissertation in IP law on the OGL itself. And he and I had a fantastic conversation the other night, about an hour and 20 minutes. And that convinced me that it also is actually what we say it is. So I do recommend both of those streams to catch up. There are clips also on the channel, but if you want to watch the entire interviews to get up on these subjects, I think that's the most important one. Okay. I think the first thing we should say again, so now we get into it. I think the first thing that we should say again is that this is not a discussion, because I had some confusion on Twitter again today about this. And this is probably the most confusing thing to people who are not following this, that this is not a conversation about what WotC or Hasbro does with the D&D brand or anything that it considers its intellectual property, what it calls its product identity, has always called its product identity. This is not about that. This is about material that was licensed under an open license, built upon the philosophy of open source software and the open licensing of software, that was done here in the gaming community. There was material that was released as open content by Wizards of the Coast under an open license that we believe here is perpetual, irrevocable, cannot be deauthorized. I mean, this is an open license. And now Hasbro or Wizards of the Coast is trying to claw that back and say that that's not true. An open license is not what it actually is.
Mhm.
That license clearly defined what is the D&D brand, the D&D trademark. And for instance, we can even look at that with like the World of Ataltus books. You do not see this uses the open content here, but there is nothing that has the Dungeons and Dragons trademark on this or anything that they own.
Right.
Right, Mark?
Can't even say the words Dungeons and Dragons in it. Right.
Correct. Now, we as a community have been using like a 5e logo, which everybody has kind of a different one. But if you see 5e, then that means that we're compatible. Okay, so that's not what this is about. This is about the heart of open source licensing and what is released as open source. Do you have comments on that before we go forward, Mark?
No.
As a publisher who has used that, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm also in the software industry, so I think a lot about this. I do think that, what's unfortunate is that we're in a position where Hasbro is testing what they can do with this license. And the thing that makes it especially complicated is that the final test might only end up in court, right? And that's something that is a pretty frightening prospect for most folks who are, like a small game producer with 4 people working out of their basements, right? And so I think that in a sense, what we're sort of facing here is what happens when someone tests those open licenses and questions their validity. And that's what we're running into.
William Atkins says there's no legal mechanism to deauthorize the OGL. 1.0a deauthorize is not even a legal term. And that's what Bob Tarantino was saying. And I clipped that out, and we may watch that later. But he said, he actually used the phrase gobbledygook. He said that's not something that is a legal term that is applied to something like, I'm going to deauthorize this license, this contract. That's not a thing. So that is, to me, one of the lines that we have drawn early on, and I think that has to continue. So yes, that's it. And in that Bob Tarantino, if you look up gobbledygook on my channel, you'll find it. But okay, because that's very important, and we may run that clip if we need to. Okay. What I was thinking about all afternoon after having read that and trying to think of what the situation was, is that I think that what they are trying to do is deliberately conflate 2 separate things. And so I want to be sure that this conversation, so much as possible, recognizes this distinction, and we understand when we're talking about one thing and when we're talking about another. It's conflating, and I think it could be a deliberate obfuscation between the status of 1.0a and what it means, what its legal status is, and then as a separate thing, whether or not what they put out for what they're calling 1.2 is actually a good license that you should sign, or that you could build a business on, or just that you should sign in general if you want to use the 6th edition 1 D&D, whatever they're calling it, material.
Yeah, right.
And I think that started yesterday, actually. Let me see. Let me bring up, I had some windows open to make this point. So let me try to bring some stuff up here. Share screen. Well, hang on 1 second. I find the right screen. Sorry about this.
That's all right.
Oh, no, right here. Find the right window. Okay, so this was yesterday's announcement. This is where I've got all my windows stacked up. We have 200 people here. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. This is fantastic. So this was yesterday's announcement, and I put out this kind of warning that I thought this was kind of the stuff that was going to happen when I saw this language right here. Oh, right up here. Any changes to the OGL will have no impact on at least these creative efforts. And he uses the word change right here. But there is no mechanism to change the OGL. what does it mean to change the OGL? As far as like, there's no mechanism by which to change it. This is the OGL over here, which is on the opengamingfoundation.org site, which Ryan Dancy put up. So we can access it here. And of course, it's in the backs of all of our books. We do have section 9, which refers to updating the license. Wizards or its designated agents may publish updated versions of this license. You may use any authorized version of this license to copy. You may use any authorized version of this license to copy, modify, and distribute any open game content originally distributed under any version of this license. So we knew it could be updated, and we understand the terms under which it could be updated. So an update is not something we would not expect, or would be completely out of the ordinary.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're talking about hey, we're going to change this, that's not something that we can do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that wording, it's Weasley when he was talking about changes. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm not a lawyer, so I think you get into some of these things where there are certain words and phrases that have very specific meanings in law, right? So updates are changes that don't require a change to the established centralized contract terms and conditions. So, you could argue there that any of these changes that they're creating represent fall outside the realm of actual updates. They're really not making updates. They're completely making a new contract, right?
I agree. It seems like if I were writing this and I were being straight and I was trying to be as straight as possible about what was going on, then I would have deliberately not included this word change. I would have talked about updates, because then I would be very clearly referencing, I would think, that section 9 and saying this is what we're doing. And I wouldn't be talking about change. There are a couple of other places where they talk about some type of new OGL, but if it's going to be an update, then it is this update. So Joseph Carter agrees. It's absolutely deliberate obfuscation. Nope. And I see your note about the super chat. No problem, Joseph. So I think they're trying to hide. I think they're trying to blur that boundary. I think they know they have a problem with, in their opinion, that they think they have a problem with regard to how they want to make money going forward with this new D&D brand. They see 1.0A as something that's standing in their way. And if they can blur the lines enough between what's actually going on here, a change versus an update, then they can distract everybody and they may get by with it. So I saw that yesterday. So Robert Romano says, I published children for a $9.99 super chat. Thank you very much, Robert. Thank you very much for generosity in being here. I published Children of the Grave under OGL 1.A earlier today. It's an open AI-driven website RPG using GPT-3, and I have designed the same source code as open game content under 1.0A. Open should be open. I want to talk more about AI, the use of AI in RPGs going forward in the channel. I think that's a really important one. So we need to check that out. Robert, that's something we need to check out on the channel here, because I know the Inner Light's also been working on AI-driven stuff. So I think that's coming. I I didn't believe it when Wizards said that they were not working on AI DMs, because there's just, in order to be responsible as a company, I think you would have to. Okay, so that was my initial thought, that, hey, we are trying to obfuscate two different things. And this is because... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, I mean, sometimes I think, though, that they're not even necessarily trying to obfuscate it. They're just simply stating a new interpretation of what all of this means, a new interpretation of how this can be read. For example, they're reading the word authorized, which to them says, thus there must be a way to deauthorize. And I think that when they talk about making changes to the OGL, sometimes I think it's not so much obfuscation so much as they're just like going, no, we just think that this is fine, right? They literally think it's okay to do all this. And that's kind of where people are coming back and saying no. So you see what I'm saying? Sort of almost like a deliberate, like, no, we don't think that's how it works.
Okay. Well, that's true. We're not in their head. We're not in their head.
Yeah, we're not. We just have to guess,
So I
right?
don't. So I don't know that it's obfuscation, but it sure seems to me this way.
Mhm.
Because I would say that if I were intentionally trying to be clear, I would have used different terminology about exactly
Yeah.
what is going on.
True.
Because
True.
so and because they're not, if they are really in the dark and if they think that this is all fine and their legal interpretation of what this is so radically different from so many people that we have talked to and all of Paizo and all the rest of the industry, then they should just say that. Then they would say that directly, that they are, as clearly as Paizo said, this is our interpretation. You would think they would say that's completely wrong. That's not how it
Yeah.
is. It is to the contrary. And they don't say that. And so they see, I believe they see that, and Lou brought this up yesterday. The primary competition for 6th edition or 1D&D is existing 5th edition. I think that's completely true.
Mhm.
So they have to stop that and get control of it. And they see the open licensing as an obstacle to that. And so they are trying to do something to stop that. And then obviously also they want control of virtual tabletops. They see where all that's going. That's where they want their money to come from all of this. Nephenor for $5 Canadian. Thank you very much, Nephenor. Says, look up the channel AI Wizard. He's talking using AI to help your DMing. Good stuff. Used it to help my fiction writing too. I will look that up too. The AI Wizard. I was thinking about AI DMing in terms of just the AI, but that's another thing we should talk about is how does the AI augment our existing DM stuff? That could be too. So, okay, so they see this as an obstacle and they want to control the virtual tabletop. Okay, so let's go to today's stuff. So let's start with what they say. Have I got that up? Okay, so this is the announcement that was today. They said for over 20 years, thousands of creators have helped grow the tabletop RPG community using a shared set of game mechanics that are the foundation for their unique worlds and other creations. We don't want that to change, and we've heard loud and clear that neither do you. So we're doing two things. We're giving the core D&D mechanics to the community through a Creative Commons license, which means they are fully in your hands. Which is fine if they want to do that. And we want to look at exactly what they are giving because it is not the entire SRD.
No.
Did you take a look at that, Mark?
I did. I looked at it in great detail. Yeah.
Okay.
I spent a lot of time looking at that today.
Okay. Well, we want to when that comes up in the license, I want to bring that up so people can know that it's not that entire 400-page document.
Yeah, and there's a lot of questions that it brings up, as many questions as opportunities. So
okay, now here they also say if you want to use quintessentially D&D content from the SRD, such as owlbears and magic missiles, OGL 1.2 will provide you a perpetual irrevocable license to do so. What did you think about this?
I'm not entirely sure how. So I think you could argue that they're saying if you want to use owlbears as they appear in the SRD, you need the license. But things like magic missile and owlbear are not trademark terms. They're not part of their, they're not like carrion crawler or beholder, right? They fall into this different category. And so I'm not sure that they mean the names so much as their full realization of those things. And that is what they left out of the Creative Commons.
Okay, we should also look then. I was just looking through. Okay, so the owlbear stat block is in the SRD.
It is, but it's not in the Creative Commons portion.
But it is not yet. It is not in the Creative Commons portion.
No, and I think when they say if you want to use owlbears, they don't own owlbear as a concept, as far as I understand it. But they do own, and they're laying claim to the copyright of how owlbears are described, rules wise, stat block, etc. Same with magic missile.
Now, Lou had talked about yesterday that saying that they need to be more carrot, that their overall approach needed to be more carrot and less stick, because they were very heavy on the stick in the past. And so if they wanted, because we've been very clear from the beginning that if they want to go forward, do a completely new rule set or something completely different for 6th edition or 1D&D, that's completely their prerogative. They can license it under whatever terms they want to license it. That's no problem. We're talking about the open content and the 1.0A. That's what our concern is. But if they want people to move over to new 6th edition and new rules, then and new licenses, then a great way to do that would be to make the rules better, whatever that is, but more for everybody. Oh my God, I got to play by these rules. And then also a license that you go, oh my God, I've got to publish under that license. It'd be great if I could all of a sudden use, and Lou was talking about directly, more product identity. Like maybe I do really want to use UONT and they open up UONT under a new license or something like that.
Yep, exactly.
That would be a carrot that they could dangle out and say, well, maybe you want this, come over here.
And that's exactly what this is. They're saying, hey, you want to use our Owl Bears and Magic Missile as they appear today, or use our spell lists? You've got to use the license, but we'll let you use that whole spell list and all those monsters.
The spells are not under the Creative Commons.
And they're not. They're under number 2 there.
So what they're doing is they're taking what the entire SRD was open content. That is open content, is released under open content under 1.0A, and now they are trying to make a division here by dividing up the SRD and saying, here's the Creative Commons part, and then hey, here's the part that the other parts, if you want it, hey, it's under 1.2.
No, actually, actually what they're doing here is they're making the Creative Commons piece have additional options. So they're adding options for creators. So I'm just going to say up front, I'm not a fan of the license as it appears today. However, it's not all terrible, right? Like in this case, they're actually giving you an additional option. On the old days under 1.0A, all you had was number 2. But now they've added number 1. So now they've given you 2 ways that you could do it.
And that's very similar to Fate. Like, for instance, the Fate core book, they license under 1.0A, or you can license under the Creative Commons. So they give you 2 options there. And so that's possible. Okay, so then they say Creative Commons.
They're giving you 2 options.
So some of the content is 2 options. Creative Commons is a nonprofit dedicated to sharing knowledge, and it developed a set of licenses to let creators do that. The Creative Commons license we picked lets us give everyone those core mechanics forever. Because we don't control the license, which we argue they did when it was under the open gaming license. But then releasing the D&D core rules under the Creative Commons will be a decision that we can never change, which we think has already been done. But okay. So let's talk OGL 1.2 and the important ways it's different from 1.0A. First, it allows us to address hateful content. We're going to talk a lot about that. Second, it only applies to published tabletop RPG content, including VTTs. Third, this license specifically includes the word irrevocable. What's not there? No royalty payment, no financial reporting, no license back, no registration, no distinction between commercial and non-commercial. Nothing will impact any content you've already published under OGL 1.0A. That will always be licensed under 1.0A. Your stuff is your stuff. What they seem to be forgetting here is that you can use 1.0A to make your own stuff open game content, and that perpetuates down the line. So we'll talk about that. I think
we're saying that. They're saying that's not true. They're saying that once they deauthorize it, 1.0A can only be used for things that have already been published. Right. That's what they're saying. We're each saying different things, right? They're saying something different than the community. So.
Right. Yes. Okay. Because okay. So let's make sure we're clear on our understanding, because this is my understanding. Okay. So let's say I've got a book that has got, as using the open game content, like for instance, Black Hack RPG. Last Tuesday, we were looking at the Black Hack RPG. And actually, I can bring that up right over here just so that you can see. This is, well, not that one. Well, I used to, oh no, it's right here. Okay, this is the Black Hack RPG right here. So we liked this one on one of the Tuesdays, one of the morning grinds we looked at. And we said, oh, hey, look, Black Hack actually licenses itself under 1.0A. So if you want to use it, you can use it. So Black Hack has already been published under 1.0A. And if you want to use their stuff, they say the name Black Hack, additional things, and all artwork, logos, and layout are product identity. I can probably. So they say they're very generous. They say the Black Hack, additional things, are all artwork, logos, and layout are product identity, which means you cannot use it. but that all text and tables are open game content.
Yeah.
Very generous of them. So you can use that and license that as well. So if I found a copy of Black Hack, knew nothing about Dungeons and Dragons, knew nothing about Hasbro or WotC, but I found a copy of Black Hack, I could open it up and I could look at the back and I go, look, oh my God, look at this license for open gaming content. Look at all this stuff I can use. And then I could go publish something based on that material. And I wouldn't I wouldn't ever have to worry that, oh, did Black Hack, the company that runs Black Hack, whoever that is, did they deauthorize this license for this book? Because that's never going to happen. Like
right.
We're talking about
the problem. Yeah.
Yeah. See, yeah, we're talking about can WotC deauthorize the whole thing? But that whole issue becomes also more clear, like, and how difficult this whole thing is, because that also means that any individual publisher can't deauthorize or revoke the OGL once they published it. You never have to worry, gee, did the guy who wrote the Black Hack like tweet sometime, hey, I'm revoking and deauthorizing the OGL for the Black Hack book? You never have to worry about that because there's no provision for that. So that applies to everybody equally, including, I argue, Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro. I mean, you never have to worry about it. If you see this license in the back of the book, you know, it would say in it, hey, also please check, you know, but hey, this license is revocable at any time by the publisher. Be sure to check their website to be sure they haven't decided, hey, we're revoking it.
Yeah.
You never have to worry about that. So if I found a copy of Black Hack, let's say they try to do whatever they're trying to do next week or whatever, but I find this copy of Black Hack in 3 years, I have no idea what's going on. I could take that book, the terms of the license, and publish a whole new book that completely validly. And so that's why it makes no sense to say we're deauthorizing 1.0A, because other people are using it. I mean, it's something that's out there. It can be used. It's a license that's out there.
Yeah, and that's their line in their sand. That's their alternative facts that they're trying to come up with, where they're sort of saying, like, actually, we think we can. And it's up to you to prove us wrong, right? That's what they're trying to say. But it's not necessarily true. It could be the other way around. If people just keep using 1.0A, it would be up to them to prove that we shouldn't be.
Here's a question that is related to how we could arm ourselves as a community. And I think this is probably not something that is legally allowed, because I'm not sure about standing as far as standing in court goes. But I was thinking about this with Paizo's declaration that they're willing to fight it in court if it comes to that, or if they need to, or whatever like that. Is it possible to do something like an Article 5 of the NATO treaty for all of the game publisher companies, that like a lawsuit against one of us, you know, or a legal action against one of us, against 1.0A, we are all in?
That's be one of the most fun ways to think about dealing with this that I've ever heard. I love that idea, on Article 5 for gamers. It's for the game industry. That's pretty fantastic.
If anyone comes, we need that. See, I don't know if we could all join a lawsuit, because I don't know about standing, but we could all be there emotionally, spiritually, and as far as financially goes. You know, if Paizo is serious, for instance, and WotC decides, hey, we're going to go against, you know, Joe Blow, you know, who's just publishing his cool stuff, and they're like, that's where we're going to make our stand. Let's attack that guy. We're all in to help that guy. So I'm in favor of that. We need to look at Article 5 of the open gaming license for the community. We need that. We need that. That's exactly what we need. An attack on one of us is an attack on all of us when it comes to an attack on the 1.0A. What do you think about that, community? I see all kinds of comments. Let's see.
Oh yeah.
Let me see what we've got going on here. See what's going on in virtual tabletop. Yeah, we want to get to that virtual tabletop license, because all of that's moving so fast, and the whole AI stuff. Yeah, see, building Persephone. That is what Ryan Dancy talked about. Authorized indicates officially recognized, hence deauthorized would suggest no longer recognized as official or superseded by something else. But that isn't exactly how contracts works. He was specifically put authorized in there. He said to say that you can't publish under a draft. If you're passing around a draft, you can't publish under that. Hey, I'm thinking about publishing this. What do you think about it? That's not valid.
Quite a few people. Oh, what's this?
Do they mean expression of the mechanics? Because the mechanics aren't under protection; it's their expressions. I forget where exactly that came up.
Probably talking about
with regard to Black Hack. With regard to Black Hack,
it might be Black Hack. It might be Creative Commons though, because if that one came in back when we were talking about that, right? The reality is that the Creative Commons, they're giving away not only the mechanics, which they don't necessarily have the right to own or give away, but they are also letting you use all of their text.
And we should say why that's important, because there's this word called templating. We need to understand this word called templating. And this was what Ryan Dancy brought this up, because there are a lot of people. Okay, so he said the concept of templating is this in game design. And he said they specifically at WotC used this a lot and kind of laid all the foundation for it really in Magic the Gathering. They said, we're going to template the language for every rule, because you've got this mechanic, which is an abstract thing, and then you've got text, which is an expression about how to describe it. And they realized that if you need to reference a rule on 10 or 12 different cards, you don't want that rule using different words on all 12 of those cards, even if you're especially if you're trying to describe the same thing. So we said that's called templating. So the rule is written one time in this particular language that they like, and then anytime you need to use that rule, you use exactly that language. So that's templating within one publication house, like one publisher. Seems like a good rule to follow for game design. But now with the SRD under 1.0a, that allows us to basically do templating across the entire gaming industry. So if you need to reference that, whenever we're worried about these mechanics or working with these mechanics, if you want to talk about how to make an attack or how to use a specific spell, you now have access to the canonical expression of that rule that you can use, and you don't have to come up with your own expression, because we don't want 50 different game publishers. If we're all trying to use the same rule set, we don't want 50 different game publishers to have to come up with 50 different ways to write how to make an attack in Dungeons and Dragons.
Like somebody said, we don't have to have people start using wording like tumbling polyhedrals. Access your inner light brought that. I was like, yeah, exactly. Right. We don't want to do that sort of weird gymnastics to try to come up with weird ways to say things.
Right. We do not want to do that. That was part of the additional genius of the OGL that allows us all to do that. And because I see in my comments a lot, there are a lot of people who say that, or a fair number, who their comment on all of this is, well, then just, or they know it's easy. It's easy. Just rewrite the SRD in your own words. Could you just do that easily for me, Mark?
I mean, no. I don't think I could just do it easily, and I don't think you could just do it easily without bringing down the wrath of Hasbro, right? I think that's the other danger there, is that at that point, you're basically painting a target on your back, and that's heroic. And good job to anybody who does that, but
maybe it could be done, but it would be like having a stack of 400 sheets of paper and like you're doing the exercise on plagiarism anywhere in your school. Okay, now read something, read it, understand it. Now flip it over. Now go to your computer and type what that is in your own words. That's what you'd be doing for 400 pages. And then you end up with all of then people want to know, how different does the expression have to be?
Exactly. Right.
Which the OGL and our philosophy of open gaming and open gaming content was eliminated that. And that's why it's so important to preserve. One of the reasons it's so important to preserve. It eliminates all of that ambiguity and all of that questions. Amir Hussein says 1.0a doesn't do what they want. It allows someone to make a video game out of 5e rules because the 5e plus SRD is under the OGL.
Right.
Yeah. It's not doing what they want
yeah.
it to do. They want it to be much more restricted. Okay. So, Mark, I don't know how long you have, so feel free to cut out when you need to go. I know
I'll let you know if I have to drop out. I will have to eventually, but I'm okay for now.
Okay. So we were just we had gone over here. Okay. So
yep.
Though there's a link at the end of this note where you can download a PDF of the proposed OGL 1.2 along with supporting documents for your review and feedback. Before you scroll down and grab it, let me give you some more details about what's in there. Protecting D&D's inclusive play experience. As I said above, content more clearly associated with D&D, like classes, spells, and monsters, is what falls under the OGL. If you see that OGL 1.2 lets us act, you'll see that OGL 1.2 lets us act when offensive and hurtful content is published using the covered D&D stuff. We want an inclusive, safe play experience for everyone. This is deeply important to us, and 1.0a didn't give us any ability to ensure it. Why don't we? There's a lot to talk about there, and we did talk about this because there's a lot that I want to say with regard to that, but we may want to do it when we actually get to that point in the actual content. This is still them, right? Because Ryan Dancy was very clear on the way that 1.0a protected Wizards of the Coast from exactly situations like this. And he talked about the D20 trademark license, which I want to talk about. So this idea that they lead with this idea that they're trying to protect us all. This is for our own good. We're trying to protect you from seeing something that's offensive or hurtful. Okay. First of all, I don't need, if I'm reading a if I'm reading a book, I am an adult. I really don't need their corporate help protecting me from something that they think might offend me. I have no need for that whatsoever. That's very kind of them to be saying that they're doing this because they want to make sure that I, an adult, don't accidentally see something that they think might be offensive or hurtful. That's ridiculous. But that's how they're leading off with this to do other things that they don't need to do anyway. But anyway, okay, we're going to get to the mechanisms behind that in a moment.
Yeah.
Because we understand, but to be clear, we understand that if they have their D&D logo, they have their D&D properties and things like that, and there may be things that they do not want associated with that. But there were other mechanisms that did that. And we will explore those mechanisms in a moment. Tabletop RPG and VTTs. OGL 1.2 will only apply to tabletop RPG content, whether published as books, as electronic publications, or on virtual tabletops. Nobody needs to wonder or worry if it applies to anything else. It doesn't. I saw in the comments go by, and I thought it was a great point because I have thought about this too, and we haven't addressed the channel. They're talking about static content, like a PDF, but as has been pointed out, there can be dynamic aspects of PDFs.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have fillable PDFs. You can embed sound into PDFs, and you can embed video into. I mean, the PDF doesn't have to be specifically static. So, there is that. And then they say deauthorizing OGL 1.0a. We know this is a big concern. The Creative Commons license and the open terms of 1.2 are intended to help with that. They're not helping. One key reason why we have to deauthorize. We can't use the protective options in 1.2 if someone can just choose to publish harmful, discriminatory, or illegal content under 1.0a. And again, any content you have already published under OGL 1.0a will still always be licensed under OGL 1.0a. Go ahead.
Yeah, this whole argument that they have to deauthorize in order to do what they want to do, that's really not true. They can do exactly what they want to do with the new content or even with the current SRD under a new license, offering new benefits to people who use the new license. But the old license doesn't, cause them any grief in that area. You can't put the words Dungeons and Dragons in your book along with offensive content. You can't make them look bad in that way. So yeah, that's the whole sort of thing where the gamers are looking at it. We go sit around tables where game masters try to fool us with bizarre wording and tricks all the time. We're really good at sort of sussing out when there's another motive underneath. So
Right. Yeah. And it's not like it's something that was not thought about when
Yeah.
1.0A was released. Dancy was very clear about that. And because he did say, he thought about that. What are the mechanisms of 1.0A? That's one of the reasons that 1.0A forbids you from using Dungeons and Dragons trademark and product identity and so forth. That's one of the reasons why it's more restrictive than that. And that way it was very easy for them to say, if somebody publishes something terrible, for them to just easily say, we have nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
We condemn it, which is the easiest way to go. I mean, the easiest thing for a company to do. Here's the stuff that can publish under. It has nothing to do with us. You cannot imply that we, are endorsing it in your material, and you cannot use our trademarks or whatever else. So if somebody publishes something horrible and then the media is like, oh my God, did you see that there was this book? The answer is very simple. We have nothing to do with that book. We condemn it.
Yeah. We don't police it. It's not our role to police it. And that was a great point that Ryan brought up, was just that it does set them up to have to police these things going forward. And that's kind of a terrible position for Hasbro to be in.
And I'm not sure why. That's why one of the many reasons I'm skeptical of this, because the reason that stuff that Ryan Dancy articulated, that seems to be the position I would want with my company. Anybody would want to have with that company. You don't want to be in a position to have to police it, because then if something gets through, then you're just as responsible. So, but in today's world, a large group of people are very sensitive to this. Oh my God, what if somebody publishes something that is, offensive, and then, Hasbro is actually here to the rescue to try to make sure that nobody accidentally, or publishes something offensive that you might see. So that seems to be like virtuous to a certain group of people. That's very virtuous. Some people are like that on Twitter with me today. Oh my God, you cannot, they're just trying to make sure that nothing offensive is published. They're definitely thinking of Wizards of the Coast as being very virtuous in this regard. Whereas actually its cover, I believe, certainly seems like it, to assert control over things that they have no control over. And they're trying to do it in this guise of being virtuous by making sure that I don't see something that I might be offended by.
So I think outside of this agreement, Hasbro does have, as a toy company making toys for children, it is in their best interest to not be associated with things that are hateful and horrible. Because let's be honest, there are some hateful, horrible people who go out of their way to make hateful, horrible things. And Dungeons and Dragons, thus owned by WotC, thus owned by Hasbro, they have a duty to their shareholders to ensure that they maintain a certain image. And that image has certain values associated with it. So yes, they do have a need to do that. The problem is that they're using that as an excuse in this case to what is truly not they're doing it for non-virtuous reasons, but it's still a somewhat virtuous act. They're using it as an excuse to do the things they want to do for financial reasons. And that's what's kind of terrible about it. It's not so much that they're worried about us seeing something offensive. They're suggesting that they want to maintain their brand image, which is a completely logical thing for a business to do, but that's not why they're putting it in here. And
it's not why they're putting it in
here. We know
that,
right?
And it's not like their brand image, like we gotta say again, their trademark, the Dungeons and Dragons IP, is not something that you would legally under a license like see on a book like that anyway. I mean, if they did that, it would be a breach of the license anyway. So the disco option says the hobby does not need WotC to be its new moral police. It's been regulating itself just fine for years. The morality around their own logos and their property is one thing. This is different. Okay, so they also say very limited license changes allowed. Only 2 sections can be changed once OGL 1.2 is live. How you cite wizards in your work and how we can contact each other. We don't know what the future holds or what technologies we'll use to communicate with each other, so we thought these 2 sections needed to be future-proofed. For completeness, let's sum up what else is in the OGL 1.2 and supporting documents. Virtual tabletop policy. We will continue to support virtual tabletop usage for both OGL creators and virtual tabletop operators. The virtual tabletop policy spells this out in a very limiting and disingenuous way that serves their purposes. Ownership disputes. You own your content. You don't give Wizards any license back, and for any ownership disputes, you can sue for breach of contract and monetary damages versus holding up products to other players other players are waiting for while we sort it out. No hateful content or conduct. If you include harmful, discriminatory, or illegal content or engage in that conduct publicly, we can terminate your OGL 1.2 license to your content. Creator product badge. You'll have the option to include a badge on your OGL works. Once we get your feedback on the badge, we'll create a guide on how to use and display it. I got a lot to say on that badge. Overall, what we're going to do here is giving a good faith creators the same level of freedom or greater for the things in Creative Commons to create tabletop RPG content that's been so great for everyone, while giving us the tools to ensure the gaming community continues to become even more inclusive and welcoming. Okay, so here is the document, and then how to review it. So let's go to the document. Anything we should say before we do that?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, let's go over here to the actual document itself. I'll scroll down the comments just a moment to see what well, see, this is another thing. Like Soda Saint says, we talked about this when we're looking at the leak. Like I can get going after some that publish legitimately terrible things, but the hateful clause is way too vague. And of course, they're the arbiters. And of course, they have to be the arbiters because it's their license. But it's whoever is going to be the arbiter. And when we saw that leak, it was like, well, and you have no recourse to, if we say something, there's no legal recourse. And if we see some stuff we'll know that we go too far if we see a backlash on social media.
Right. That'll be our punishment.
That was so ridiculous. We'll revise. But also that's I was thinking about that part too. And like, so let's say that you're really small time. You only have like 12 Twitter followers or something like that. So if Wizards of the Coast decides, hey, your book is offensive, license gone, and you think that it's completely wrong, but you only have 12 Twitter followers, and you tweet to your 12 Twitter followers that, oh my God, WotC just yanked my license. Okay, that goes nowhere. So that's the power. Then, like, the more social media clout you've got, the more, like, that's why you should have legal recourse. Yeah, because it shouldn't matter how popular you are on Twitter to what they can do to you. But
I think that, this whole the clause being way too vague, it all comes back to the fact that they're trying to put the system back in the box, right? They're trying to take back control of this so that they can manage it going forward for financial reasons, for design reasons, for a host of reasons, but mostly money, right? And unfortunately, they're using things like this as their sort of cover for that, even if it's something they really do want to do in order to defend their license as a wholesome toy company for kids. They still are struggling to make a good case for it.
Okay, so this is the draft for discussion purposes only. So, many ways to create. Dungeons & Dragons content is available to you in many ways. The core D&D mechanics, which are located on pages 56 to 104. And we should bring this up so we can just show that to people so we can see exactly what it is. So it's 56 to page 104, 254 to 260, and 258 and 259 of the system reference document 5.1, but not the examples used on those pages, are licensed to you under the Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 International CC BY 4.0, which means that Wizards is not placing any limitations at all on how you use that content. Mark, you may probably have a lot more information on this than I do. Let me ask you about the system reference, because I do have system reference documents, so we'll take a look at that. But this is system reference document 5.1. So we all know what that is because this is the latest version, or if you've been publishing, you know what this is. This is the one that you
I know very well. Yes. Yeah.
I'm sure you know it especially well. But if they're about to make these revisions and changes for one D&D, they've been putting out the playtesting content and stuff like that, wouldn't it make sense that would be a new SRD?
Oh, there probably will be a new SRD. But this one right now is coming out before one D&D is finished. Right? It's coming out. They're trying to put it out within the next couple of months. They wanted to put it out in January. So at this time, the only SRD is 5.1. They'll probably redo it when the time comes. Right. So they'll have the new SRD, and have to do another version of the license because it doesn't mention that version for the new SRD.
So, right. So I was thinking about that, and I was saying that so they're offering up that, but that does not necessarily mean, and probably does not mean, that by the time a 6th edition comes out or 1 D&D edition, that you would have that information under Creative Commons. There's no guarantee that, because that'd be a different SRD.
Yeah, it'd be a different SRD, and it's going to have to be a different license because the current license says 5.1.
Yeah, we're
It
dealing
refers
with
to a very specific version of the SRD, right?
So in of course, since we're saying they can go and do whatever they want with 6.0. So if they are releasing this is what we're using. That may help some, whatever we're talking about it. I just want to be clear, that's not giving us access to what might be coming in. They're not guaranteeing that we're having any continued access to anything that's current. They're not guaranteeing that, which is fine, but it just needs to be clear that
Correct.
That is the case. So do you have
yeah, so I can tell you this covers the things that it doesn't cover. Up to page 56 are all of the races and all of the classes. So that leaves out all the races and classes. Now, what isn't clear to me is, does that mean that I can create my own races and classes using the same general format, or do I have to come up with a completely different way to realize races and classes? I just don't know. It's confusing to me what they're actually keeping control of here. The same thing goes for examples, because once you even hit the stuff that's considered Creative Commons on page 56, they have things like multi-classing prerequisites. Is that what examples are? Barbarian, strength 13, because we can't use barbarian because it's not part of this, right? So we don't have a barbarian class. So those must be examples that aren't included.
Okay.
So yeah, it's just very confusing to me. Like I kind of feel like if you only take the pieces they've given you, you almost have to come up with a brand new way to handle classes from scratch.
So yeah, that was no races and classes, which is very important. It's not like that's not an important part of D&D. So we start here and we go through, what page is it? 104. So this is alignment, languages, inspiration, backgrounds. The backgrounds are here. Equipment, armor, weapons, adventuring gear. This is, they are saying, going to Creative Commons.
Yep, class features go in there, right?
Trade goods, food and drink, feats. So what a feat is, and this one, but of course there wasn't a whole lot about feats anyway in the SRD.
No, they didn't put a lot in.
This is using ability scores, advantage and disadvantage. People ask about advantage and disadvantage specifically. On the channel, working together. So this to me would be the core. This would be to me the core of how to play. We talk about the actual how to use ability checks and stuff like that.
Right.
So
right.
That's here.
And they do list the abilities, right? So the abilities apparently are, the ability list is being made available.
That is a great point. Resting between adventures. So the order of combat, initiative. So terrain, that is all in. Actions in combat, attacking. People said that did they really have that much clout over attack? If the word attack, if you were rewriting it, and I think that
the thing is that
hyperbole
they're not saying they own attack. What they're saying they're giving us is this wording of how to make an attack,
right? Yeah,
and the general concept of what the mechanic is underneath it.
Damage and healing, mounted combat, underwater combat. Spell casting. So the rules for spell casting, not the spells, but the last thing then is rules for spell casting.
Yep.
Okay. So that's what they're saying. And then 254. So we got to skip all over the spells here, because I was like, what are the little things that, so 254 that starts.
Yeah, I get confused. Like for me, when they start talking about things like polymorph, I mean, so can I not make a polymorph spell because it's in the SRD, but not in the Creative Commons? If I'm just using Creative Commons, I mean, it's complicated at that point, more than it needs to be.
So when we skip all the way to page 254, we are now on monsters. which gives us the rules for running monsters.
Yep. Monster
that describes
abilities.
all the stat blocks, and then it stops 260. So it gives us all the rules and the clarifications on the stat blocks, and then stops right before you get.
When
to
you
the
say
monsters.
stat block, it doesn't give you the stat block. It gives you the components of a stat block.
Correct. Yes, it gives you the components of it and what that means. Like, what is a monster's challenge rating? What is experience points or dark vision? And then there's 2 more pages, 358. So there was the description of monsters, 358. See, I do not want to have to rewrite this in my own words. If you've never flipped through the SRD before, just do this real quick. 358. If I'm doing that, I'm right. I mean, I'm writing my own RPG anyway. I mean, you are too. We're both working on that. So yeah, we'll just make our own rather than trying to rewrite what D&D was. So 358 though, is conditions. That's right. So the 358 and 359 are the conditions. So that was it. Okay.
And I have to say that this is a decent batch of stuff, including the expression of those rules, to give to people. Like, I know that I don't really like 1.2 overall, but that's not a bad thing. It made me kind of happy to see them doing that, right? Because it sort of puts it out of their hands at that point.
Well, and I would say that is they did specifically say, looking over here, the mechanics. And I would say that identification of those pages is the core of how to play. It doesn't give you anything else, but it does give you the core of how to play 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. I would say. And
I could write my own 5th edition game from the ground up using just that, and it would play like 5th edition. But the argument that a lot of folks have made is that they don't own the mechanics anyway. And so they're not really giving you anything except that the way they've described the rules. And that's what Paizo would say, for example, I think.
Right. Keith Robbins reports ratified the Article 5 RPG laws. Put that out there. The Article 5. We need our own Article 5. I'm still, that's it. Yes. Okay. I did bring up what that is, because we were looking at creative content, like the Creative Commons licenses. There is what they link to. You're not going to go over this here in detail, but this is Attribution 4.0 International. And this this was one of the issues with the Creative Commons license, is that there are multiple Creative Commons licenses. And we ran into a situation like last Tuesday when we were looking at our RPG design on the Morning Grind. Okay, now how can we use this? And okay, something said Creative Commons, but it actually didn't specify exactly which Creative Commons license it was. So there was some ambiguity. So that's an issue with Creative Commons licenses, not a specific license. That could be great, but just which one are you using? So that is an issue, but they are specifically using this one. So if you want to go through it, all of it is here, but they say here is their human readable summary. Just so we know for here, they are saying that you are free to share, copy, and redistribute the material in any medium or format, adapt, remix, transform, and build upon the material for any purposes, even commercially. The licensor cannot revoke these freedoms so long as you follow the license terms, and the license terms are attribution. You must give appropriate credit, provide a link to the license, and indicate if any changes were made. You may do so in any reasonable manner, but not in any way that suggests the licensor endorses you or your use. And then you may not limit other people's ability to doing other things this license permits. So that is what that Creative Commons license is. Good. Which I believe is actually the same with like Fate uses. I've seen that one used pretty commonly in the RPG. When I've seen a Creative Commons RPG, when that one is used, people want the credit.
The international is nice because, that's something that I've been looking at as we build out our system, is that, certain things like just saying public domain doesn't necessarily carry across borders, right? So that's really important to make sure that you've got a license that defends the right of people to, do what they want with those rules.
Did you hear what Bob said about the about public domain? I thought it was really interesting.
What did he say about that? I don't remember that part.
Okay, this is an important thing because people had asked, in the comments, and I was like, this is interesting.
Mhm.
Why not, if you're intending to just give away your stuff,
Yeah.
if you want people to be able to just use it, then why don't you just put it into the public domain? And so I
Mhm.
asked him that. And his reason was that he would not do that because his main reason was that there is no standardized way for a company or a person or an entity to put something in the public domain. And what exactly that means different things in different places anyway. And
Exactly.
because it's
Yeah.
non-standardized, I mean, you could just make a declaration, I hereby give this to the public domain, but what exactly that means is not exactly clear, and did that work anyway? And so he was saying that there is the Creative Commons 0 license, which is basically just,
Mhm.
it is out there, do whatever, you don't have to credit me,
Yeah.
it's just out there. So he was recommending something like that for that reason, because how you put something in the public domain and what that means is not nearly as defined as something like a Creative Commons 0 license.
That's exactly the feedback we got on Cool Name RPG when we were getting some advice on how to license it. So yeah, same thing.
Okay, Soda Saint commentaries, you win the live stream. You win the live stream. We should call it the Thaco Treaty. Tabletop Hostilities Alert Cooperative Organization. Let's get that going.
Yeah,
We need
that's fantastic.
We need the Thaco Treaty. And how do I copy that? And get all of the tabletop publishers to sign that. An attack on 1.0A on any of us is an attack on all of us. And we go. I love that. I love it. So that's it. We need the Thaco Tree. That's it. You win, Soda Saint. You win.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. So our copyright, going then beyond that, our copyrights to the other content included. Well, okay, there's one thing I want to say here too. I suppose we say this means that Wizards is not placing any limitations at all on how you use that content. So that does mean that they're not, that because there is no hateful whatever morality something in that. That does mean that they must not be concerned about that. That if somebody makes something using those rules and mechanics that is terrible.
But
they'll let it go.
It doesn't seem like it's a logical, actual reason.
Yeah. I mean, obviously they don't have that problem because that defends them. I mean, that's what the whole thing we were talking with Ryan is like. If somebody does that, then their response is, "Hey, we did that. That's a Creative Commons. We don't have any response to that, or any responsibility for that. We condemn it." Which is the way we should. It seems like they should go on all of this. I've got a super chat here, and then we will go to.
And it's a good comment too. It's one of the things that I was even thinking about when we were talking about. It's a great comment.
Okay, here we go. Dina Gilbert for $5 Canadian. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for your generosity. Deanna Gilbert. Deanna says, I am trans and I don't want an obscenity clause to protect me. Such clauses often are used against us. See Twitter, obscenity clauses open. So I think that is a great point too. So
you don't want at some point Hasbro to decide that having a trans character in your game is obscene, right? I mean, that's exactly what they're saying, right? And that's right. A great point. Yeah.
That especially when you're talking about, because that's right, people do that kind of stuff all the time, and they often will do it under the guise of protecting children or whatever. And you were talking about toys and the association with different. It's a sword that can cut both ways. It's a sword that can cut both ways, and so it's just better for them to not have control. Thank you, Deanna. Okay, so then our copyrights and the other content included in the system reference documents are licensed to you under the Open Gaming License 2.0. That's that division we were talking about. What was the SRD? They're trying to divide in two now and go to the 1.2. The use of D&D content in virtual tabletops is allowed under the terms of the virtual tabletop policy. That's here at the end of this document.
Yeah.
So we'll get to that when we get there. The use of D&D content in streaming, fan art, cosplay, and other fan content is permitted as described in the Wizards fan content policy. We need to go over that at some point later. We still haven't done that, but later. So there's something else that governs all of that. But that wasn't
Mhm.
under the OGL anyway. I mean, most people didn't use the OGL for that kind of stuff anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know of any examples. Maybe there's somebody, but that's not. Platforms such as D&D Beyond and DM's Guild provide additional paths to share D&D content under different license terms. And that's always also been the case. That, yeah, we knew that DM's Guild is something else. Okay. So creator product badges. I got a lot to say on this too, but I'm interested to know what you think about this first, Mark. It says, for content published under the OGL 1.2, you may use one of the following badges in the manner specified in the creator product badge style guide, which I don't think is up yet, but there'll be a style guide for this. So long as you comply with that guide in using the badges, Wizards licenses you under the OGL 1.2 to use such a badge on any of your licensed works. I got problems with it, but what do you think? Wait, what is your as a publisher? Yeah,
I think everything that they're doing should be under a creator product badge guide. I think they should leave the OGL the way it is. I think they should create this, and in exchange for giving up certain rights and for accepting certain restrictions, you get to put a badge that's clearly D&D on your product, because that would be a huge benefit, right? Like right now, I have to put a 5e. Are the kids from the local D&D club going to know that a 5e logo is 5th edition? Maybe not. Are they going to know that the ampersand is 5th edition? Absolutely. And so I think that if they bound this to everything they're trying to do here, as opposed to trying to make changes to the 1.0a, that would be a completely different story. It would be a new program you could sign up for. So, that's my thought on it. In terms of it within this license, I don't think it's a terrible idea. Knowing what the style guide is interesting, but I do have to say that I often wish I had a better way of representing what game my books are for.
Okay, so here were my thoughts on this. Because what they're trying to do, because we talked to Ryan Dancing, we need to bring this up again, the D20 trademark license.
Right, exactly.
So now they're trying to conflate these things again. They're trying to put like what was the D20 trademark license into this as well. And if it was better separated, like it was doing everything it was supposed to do separated, because and I think some people will not know what that is, because the D20 logo, I remember it being everywhere. Okay. So how do we want to start with this? Okay, but this right here. So for instance, how did they used to handle this? They handled this in a great way. So Ryan Dancy was saying that there were 3 things that were out there. Well, I guess depending on how you want to count them, maybe 4. But you had the SRD when it was released. Here's your SRD of your mechanics and your expression of these mechanics. Here's the OGL, which licenses that to you. And if you use the expression of those mechanics, you cannot put Dungeons and Dragons on there. You cannot use that trademark. But then there was another license that was to the D20 trademark. And so what they did is he called it a bridge trademark, a bridge brand to bridge creator content and the Dungeons and Dragons content to solve exactly this problem, so that you would know that if you saw this logo on somebody else's work, that it was compatible with Dungeons and Dragons. And critically, the Dungeons and Dragons books had the same logo on it. Let me show you. If you have never seen this before, I am holding a 3.5 edition Player's Handbook. And in fact, I'm going to go solo for just a second so I can hold this up so everybody can see it.
Yeah.
As far as the layout goes. So right here, this little logo right here is the D20 system logo right there. And you used to see that everywhere. That was a separate trademarked logo that had its own license, that if you were a creator that wanted to license, you had additional restrictions you had to conform to if you wanted to put the D20 logo on the book. So there were things like the review. It could be revoked. That could be taken away from you. That was something that was different. That's something that could be taken away if you didn't conform to additional rules, which is fine, because then you could put that on your book. There we go, right, a solo. And then they also put the same thing on their book. That is, to me, a lot of goodwill right there. I mean, it's small. It's right there, but it's saying D20 system, this is part of the D20 system, and it's putting us all the publishers, as peers.
Yeah.
That we're all using this logo. because you could have the Atultus brand, which you did. I mean, it was going on at the same time. But you could have that brand, just like they've got Dungeons and Dragons, and then both of your books would have the D20 logo on the back, and that would be the connective tissue.
Yeah.
This
had
is
they done
different.
the same thing here, that would have been awesome, right?
Yes. They could have revived that idea, which that's what they should have done. They should have gone back to what Ryan had created.
Yeah.
They should have said, if they wanted that, here's a new logo that we're going to be using that means these things, and there are more restrictions on it as far as what you can write about or whatever they want to put on it. Because we don't have to use it, but they could put whatever kind of restrictions they would want on it if they're worried about brand identity and stuff like that. And then, but the key there is that it was on all the books. The reason that I don't really like to use the word offended very much but when I look at this, I don't want to put that on my product. The carrot is that it does have the ampersand. So that's a very nice and very important carrot. That's a very important carrot. But the fact that it says creator product, it's not implying in the past, there has been that peer relationship between the publishers. Yeah. And this is clearly identifying, oh, that's a creator product. That's a creator product.
Yeah.
And that is not anything I'd want to put on mine. Like I'm like, okay. Not
the word compatible would be a better phrasing, right?
I would take that. See, I would take that. If it said, because even if they don't want to put this logo on their own book, that would be a huge amount of goodwill. I think the same thing that you have the same logo on all books, that would be a tremendous amount of goodwill. But if they're not going to do that, then if you replace the word creator product with like the ampersand and compatible,
right,
that's better. For some reason, the word creator product just rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, they're just making it. They might as well say fan, right? Might as well say
that's what it
fan
sounds
fiction
like.
or something, right? I think the thing too is that honestly, I would even consider royalties if I could use a D&D logo on my books. I mean, that's the thing that they're kind of missed out on, is they had an opportunity here to actually make more money, get more people on board, take more control by, instead of getting rid of what we have, just offering something more. Because as a creator, if I could know that when people go into a store and they pick up my book or they look at it online and they see that logo, that would be huge to me, right? It would be huge. But that's not the route they went yet.
Yeah.
Maybe they will change. Who knows?
That would be another big thing. I mean, that would be another big thing. And we'll talk about like whether or not this is something good to sign. It's based on business and it's based on the value of that logo.
Yeah.
I see this right here. MMA History and Highlight says, I think the morality has to be left up to wizards to determine. Imagine if we made our 1920s obscenity laws irrevocable. There can be consequences both ways, but it has to be fluid and functional. Well, yeah, I know that's not what I was arguing, because I wouldn't want to codify like the obscenity thing, because like you're talking about like 100 years later, but even less than that. But right, then you're looking at 100-year-old morality thing. But Wizards had said that it's up to them and there's no recourse from you. The fluidity here has to be a back and forth. And the idea that it's just them, that doesn't work. Now it could be just them if like that for that ampersand or some of that IP, I would completely understand that. I would completely understand that part. If you're saying that like this, because they can't stop you from publishing it, but they could say you cannot put the ampersand on there.
Yeah.
We're just not taking it. Then that would be fine. That would be fine. Okay. So then we get to the notice of deauthorization of the 1.0A. The Open Gaming License 1.A is no longer an authorized license. This means that you may not use that version of the OGL or any prior version to publish SRD content after effective date, whatever that is. It does not mean that any content previously published under that version needs to update to this license. Any previously published content remains licensed under whatever version of the OGL was in effect when you published that content. This is the line in the sand. This is the one that's like, this is not what we're doing. You have to acknowledge that 1.A, it's not just something that's going on in the past, but it is something that continues today. It's like when we looked at Black Hack, This has nothing to do with Black Hack. I did look specifically here to see if they were trying to say that it's no longer authorized to use our Wizards content or something like that. If they had even acknowledged that, if that had even penetrated their minds, but they don't. They're just saying it's no longer an authorized license.
And one of the challenges I have as a creator is that I've got 7 books, and either I accept 1.2 or that's the end of that game line, right? They're not giving me a choice to continue the way I was. They're telling me that I either accept their new rules or I stop publishing.
Right. And that's
I can't do that, right? Not if I can't agree with the rules.
Right. And we're perfectly happy to have a break if there are new rules for 6th edition. But what we're talking about is continuing under 1.0A as has been the standard accepted application of that rule for the past 22 years.
Yeah.
They need to play ball with that. That's what they have to play ball with. I do. Let's see. Let me. I think that this is. I have the clip here to play. I think this would be a good time to play that clip of Bob Tarantino talking about exactly this inability to deauthorize. Because then I wished I had given him a follow-up question, and I followed up with him by email on this, so that we have an even follow-up and additional clarification on this point. So if you have not seen this, I think this is very important. It's just a clip from this interview, and then I've got a follow-up that he was very kind enough to answer by email on this. When I was going by it, when I was making clips, I was like, oh my God, there was something else that I should have asked to follow up. And he allowed that. Okay, so I'm going to take that down for just a moment and then bring up. This was, the whole thing is in the link down below, but this is where we specifically talked about deauthorization. Position on the other term in here, which is whether it can be deauthorized, authorization versus deauthorized. What's the difference between there, and how do we distinguish between whether the revocability or deauthorization nature of it?
Yeah, so I think in order to answer that question, we kind of have to take a step back and look at kind of the origins of the OGL. The OGL, because that notion of an authorized version really is a consequence of the OGL having been inspired by, and I think in large part in its drafting, guided by open source software licenses, right? Like that notion of authorization is something that you often find in open source software licenses, where the idea kind of was you would have multiple iterations of a license, which had been created by some kind of, let's call it a governing body, like some committee or organization or some collective of people who would be drafting the license and then iterating the license over time. When the open game license talks about authorization, and it only talks about authorization, right? It doesn't talk about deauthorization. I'll get back to that in a second. When the open game license talks about authorized versions, sort of in light of how open source software licenses have functioned and have been drafted and interpreted over the years, what I believe they are referring to is this notion that WotC could have, or whoever else was sort of identified as the steward of the license, could have created future versions of the license, future iterations of the license, which would have been quote unquote authorized, meaning that they were kind of in line with the original 1.0 of the license. What they were concerned about was people coming up with versions of the license which were fake, for lack of a better term, right? So somebody sort of creates a new version of the license, and they insert, a new term which WotC would never have contemplated or would not have countenanced. That would have been an unauthorized version of the license. And so when the OGL 1.0 is using the word authorized version, they're saying, look, you can use future versions of this license which come from the definitive, the authoritative source of the license. So let me go back to what we were talking about a second ago, which was deauthorization. Deauthorization, like so far as I know, isn't really a thing. right? Like there's no sort of concept in contract law. I mean, the concept of authorization in the first place doesn't really apply to contract law. But there's no concept of deauthorization. Like it's sort of a meaningless term in a lot of ways, right? Like I don't know what it means for somebody to say, well, I'm deauthorizing the contract. Like that kind of a gobbledygook to a certain extent, right? I can sit there and say a license is either an authorized version, meaning it came from the authoritative source for the license, or somebody can say it's an unauthorized version, meaning it didn't come from the authoritative source. But I don't know what it means to say that somebody is deauthorizing a contract or a license.
I think you're muted still, Heath.
Oh, okay. Now you can probably hear me.
No problem. Yeah.
So, I mean, that seems pretty straightforward to me.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, at the end of the day, we know why they're doing it, right? I mean, to a certain extent, I get frustrated at having to argue about things that is obvious if you look at it, right? We all know it's really happening. Let's call a spade and recognize it for what it is, because we can argue all day on whether they can deauthorize, but it's not about whether they can or can't. It's about whether they want to, and they want to, and they're going to try it, and they're going to pay the money to make it happen if they can.
If they were direct in that, that would go a long way. I mean, it still wouldn't like it, and it still would be bad. But at least instead of talking about, oh, we're hiding under the language of trying the morality stuff and this is what we're doing. If they're like this is what, at least they'd be straight. Land Market Networking, thank you so much for being here. In 1975 super chat. Thank you so much for being here and your generosity. Thank you for all the time and energy y'all put into this. Our community never ceases to amaze. We do have a fantastic community. We've got a fantastic community. Thank you so much, Land Marketing Network. The clarification, thank you very much. The clarification that I brought up or that I wanted to address had to do with, because we did bring up, okay, hey, will it be this if hypothetical scenario, this is not happening, but it's a hypothetical scenario, if Wizards put out 1.0b and it was identical to 1.0a, except for added the word irrevocable, would that solve all of our problems? And then we went back and forth on that. I was still wanting a statement on 1.0a to clarify its status, to make sure that it is what we believe it is. And that was the position of Ryan Dancy and so forth. But he said that, well, that probably would help us, except for the fact that then they could issue a 1.0c and then take irrevocable back out and then change something else. And so I asked him, and so that went by. And when he said that, I wished I had followed up on that, because there was an important point on that. And he said, let me get back to, I believe it's this right here. So, okay. So I said that I've been clipping up, and I had a follow-up question, though, when we were talking about adding the word irrevocable to a hypothetical 1.0a, when you mentioned that many, they could later just come up with a 1.0c that takes it back and changes things again. But my question would be, if it's not possible to deauthorize a license, which we were just talking about, why wouldn't the community just ignore the new license and continue to publish under 1.0b like they had been, that they liked better? Isn't the nature of the open license based on Section 9 of OGL 1.a, this is our Section 9, updating the license? Wizards or its designated agents may publish updated versions of this license. You may use any authorized version of this license to copy, modify, and distribute any open game content originally distributed under any version of this license, with the understanding of the FAQ that was out there as well. This was the Wizards FAQ in 2004. Can't Wizards of the Coast change the license in a way that I wouldn't like? Yes, it could. However, the license already defines what will happen to content that has been previously distributed under an earlier version in Section 9. As a result, even if Wizards made a change you disagreed with, you could continue to use an earlier acceptable version at your option. In other words, there is no reason for Wizards to ever make a change that the community of people using the open gaming license would object to, because the community would just ignore the change anyway. That's what Wizards said back in 2004. And that's the understanding we've been operating under. So they can put out version 1.2 and say whatever you want. But we have 1.0a. My position is that cannot be revoked. cannot be deauthorized, you're welcome to publish under another license if you like. Maybe it's a fantastic license. Maybe the update is fantastic, giving you other stuff. But that's true. So Bob wrote back. He said, in terms of your question, but my question would be, if it's not possible to deauthorize a license, why wouldn't the community just ignore the new license and continue to publish under 1.0 AB that they liked better? Isn't that the nature of the open license based on Section 9? And he said, yes, that's exactly the point of an open license. A licensee can continue using the terms of the original license for the content they published under it, and they don't need to adopt updated licenses if they don't want to. That's an inherent nature of the updated license.
I think the thing I'd like to know, though, is I assume that means you can continue to publish new content using the old license as well. That's one of the things that is important to me, for example, is that I can continue to publish new books under the old license. You know, part of me wonders if really the right answer to all of this was just to like ignore it and just carry on like we were doing, all of us. Because, for example, right now their deauthorization exists within their new license. So if I don't accept their new license, then I don't accept, a few people have said this, I'm not accepting the deauthorization.
Right, yeah.
So to a certain extent,
Beard Lit,
yeah,
for $5 says WotC really wants a closed ecosystem like an Xbox. That they're trying to close. I mean, they're trying to close this. They've taken all of the advantages of the open system, and now we're trying to shut the door after the horses have left, but to try to force us back in. Wait. So where was I going with that? That idea of we can go our own way. So do you want to speak then, Mark, to the idea that this is why it's so important? Because we don't need WotC. If we don't like their stuff, we could, if we love the 6th edition rules, I mean, it's perfectly possible. I mean, they've got a creative team. We could look at them. We were looking at them on the channel, and just imagine that. A few weeks ago, we were just looking at the playtest material to look at, I wonder what they did with the cleric, and I wonder whether or not I like it or not. I mean, that's the kind of stuff we were talking about. And now we've got all of this stuff. But assuming that it's deauthorized, that's not deauthorized, we can still continue. There's no deauthorization. We continue. That puts the creativity still in our hands, right, Mark? As far as the creative community that can, D&D can do whatever it wants to do, and it may become a very popular mass market brand. But if 1.A stands, then we got creative freedom. We just keep going, right?
Yeah, it does. Unfortunately, it counts on a $6.2 billion company. That's how much they made last year, not deciding to come after us like the RIAA did. You know, everyone said, well, they'll never come after some grandma or some kid, but they did, right? And that's kind of the thing that all of us look at, and we're all like, honestly, it is a little scary, right? We're like, I don't really want to put myself, and honestly, this is where it all comes down to, is that our community is rich enough and vibrant enough and big enough that we don't need wizards. We don't need wizards anymore. And I think that that's maybe what we're all learning here, is that with things like Black Flag and Paizo and hopefully Cool Name RPG, we can do our own thing. And really, maybe the right answer, rather than trying to fight them on this, is just find our own way forward, right? Say, look, fine, that's the way you guys want to go for it. But I have to say that as a person making products, looking at the new license, I still don't feel safe building a business off of that one, right? I just still don't. I don't expect them to stick to their word. I don't expect them not to come up with something new. You know, I'm just not really, I'm done with that from my perspective.
Let's talk about a natural ally, but I do see this, that Sean Gray says deauthorization spells breach of contract wrong. And then Vision 667, let me bring it up, Vision. Vision for $5. Thank you so much, Vision. Thank you so much. Vision's one of our regulars here. Vision 667 for $5 super chat. Thank you so much. Vision says, let's be honest, third-party creators would never have made anything under 1.A knowing that it could just revoke the license. They would not have. And
I'm going to say one thing about that, though, because Vision 667, we actually consulted a lawyer when we started our process years ago, right? I started this years ago. We consulted with a lawyer. They did suggest to us that Hasbro could get it in their heads to try to do something like this. And that was a level of risk we were willing to take, because for 22 years, you know, at that time, 12 years, nothing had even suggested that might happen. It's kind of like a volcano where it erupted without any earthquakes or tremors or steam coming out. We never knew this might happen. And so I think that a lot of third-party creators were aware that something could happen, but from a business perspective, the risk was low. The same way that the risk of my house flooding is quite low, fortunately for me. So yeah, I think that they might have still done it because there's a risk, but there's a benefit. But if we knew they were going to do this, nah, wouldn't have done it at all, right? Absolutely not.
Okay, yes, but I was going to say that before we get to the natural allies, it seems like Ryan Dancy did a whole lot of work talking to people individually to make sure that people did understand that it was what he said it was. Because there was the skepticism and stuff like that. He did a lot. It seems like he did a lot of work, which is probably why, and one of the many reasons that he is so on about this and saying that we have to preserve 1.0A exactly as it is, because that's what he did. A lot of personal work to convince people that it is that, and make sure that they knew and build what this was. Hushu Rattengod says, I'm behind the live. So the 1.0 FAQ, we get that through the Internet Archive. That is a great question. Let me, I've got that link. Let me throw that in the chat because, I don't have a link. Here's the link where I saw that quote on InWorld, but we can find it on the Internet Archive, and I bet somebody else will be able to put it. If you put it in the link, if you can't post a link yourself right here, put it in the wind down section of the Ravenkeep Discord, and then I'll post it here because we find it on the Internet Archive, the Wayback Machine. So that's how we find it. So that's a great question. You can read the entire FAQ about the 1.0A from 2004 on the Wayback Machine. So that's where we find it. There are links to it all around the internet now. So Mark, so regarding natural allies, then, so I think this is a topic that some people, and including the guy, and I forget his name at the moment, but who was super chatting with us on the last live stream, wants us to talk about more. And because it is not like the open gaming license all of a sudden sprang fully formed from the head of with no prior anything from Ryan Dancy's head, that it's based on the idea of open source software and open source licensing that had been going on since, I forget, I didn't check. It's either like the first GPL was something like either 1981 or 1989. I forget which one it was. Oh, look, somebody already has the archive link up. Thank you so much. Let me put it in here. I'll put it in the chat. This is the 1.0A archive or Q&A archive link. Putting it in the chat now. Thank you. Thank you very much. I love the live interaction. But and a lot of people had pointed this out, that we probably don't talk about the open licensing in the context of all open licensing that had come before, which was done in software. And I'm not familiar with that world. I did take a dive into it when this had come up, and the language is something, maybe there's something odd about the language, or there's not a magic word that is supposed to be in the OGL 1.0A that is not there. And now, that's the chink in the armor, right? Or whatever. But the idea of open source licenses has been battle tested for 20 or 30 years, depending on which date I remember, for decades, though, prior to the open gaming license. So they've sorted that out, what an open license is, what it means. It's been tested in different court situations. People have been sending me different things, and you can see the different wording that's there, and some of them are worded very different than the OG, and it still has stood up in court. There wasn't like, oh my God, it says this word and ours doesn't, and that's why it survived. So I think that a natural ally of ours in this is the software companies that, and this, I don't think this has penetrated that sphere yet. And I did talk to Bob about that, because if this goes through and they're like, you can just deauthorize an open license. There are probably some companies that have that open licensed some software 30 years ago or more, and now it's on every computer in the world practically, or something like that. And now now WotC is trying to introduce into open licenses this concept of deauthorization. And there must be some companies out there that be like, oh, wait a minute, I could deauthorize that license from 40 years ago and start getting royalties on every computer in the world. I think I will do that. And that needs to, that's not the way that this works. So it seems like natural allies here would be the open source software community. Because he did say, I asked him that, and he said that that's the way lawyers think. He said that if this went through and this happened, or there was a court decision that was bad or something like that, other lawyers in areas that are going to have a lot more money, and it was a lot more money is at stake in like the technology sector, are going to go, oh, wait a minute, deauthorize a license and then have all of this ramification for everything that's going on in the open source software world. And that's why I think that this has ramifications larger than what we're doing. And those people should be our natural allies in fighting this. There are a lot of people who would want to do that, but there are a lot of people, more people with a lot more money and things like whose software is running on computers are running on open source software. Like, no, there's no such thing as a deauthorization of an open license. What do you think about that?
I think that if you're looking at this from the point of view of we're going to need to have a court case, then that's where you go, right? I don't think that there's going to be any amount of pressure from any outside source that's going to get Hasbro to change their mind if this is what they want to do, because they've kind of made it clear that this is their stance. Their stance is that they can do this. They never in any of their communications say anything other than that. They don't even address whether or not they can do it. They just are doing it. And so I think what it comes down to is that unless there's going to be a court case, unless someone goes to court over this, I don't know that there's much value for any of these organizations to sort of step in at this point to defend the OGL. Now, if it does go to court, at that point, it becomes very valuable to them to ensure that this gets handled. And so, for example, if I had a lawyer and I was doing it, I would point them at those nonprofit organizations, those different groups. I'd say, talk to them because they're going to care how this case goes. So that's kind of where I would see them as allies in this, because that's the only time I think that it really then would benefit to get embroiled in it from their point of view.
That if there's a court case and money is at risk, and that would be a huge amount of money. That'd be a huge amount of money, much more than the tabletop gaming industry. But
yeah, because then all of a sudden you've got the opportunity to bring a decent amount of money against Hasbro, where you just don't have that opportunity right now. Right. I don't think there's anyone we could all combine together and we probably still wouldn't have enough to really worry Hasbro greatly.
Cranky Elder God for $6.66. Thank you. Nice number. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very nice. Cranky Elder God. Very suitable. Thank you. He says the legal risk for Hasbro if they lose in court that creates a legal precedent that blows up their strategy.
Yeah. But you know what?
So much.
That's absolutely true. And I worry about that, though, the other way as well. Because, yeah, the risk for Hasbro is they do it and they end up losing control of everything. And at that point, their licenses don't matter and anyone can build this stuff, right? We sort of do away with the need for the license at all. My concern is the day that we end up in court with Hasbro and they bring out software as an example of a better comparison to these books than Monopoly, and all of a sudden they're able to copyright the entire rule system, and then we end up in a ugly place. I mean, I do worry about it the other way too. I think that's a sword that cuts both ways, and we all have to be careful about that and thoughtful.
It seems like just the obvious answer. I mean, it could have been so clean if they were just like, one DnD is having a whole revised rule set. And that would have been so clean, and just done something completely different with it, and then said, hey, you know what? Our tabletop RPG is going to be so great, and the rules are so great. That would have just been, and all this stuff's going. So people are giving some examples of people where they had fought and won. Like imagine Linux being deauthorized.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So there's been 33333 says Linux and Chrome fought this battle and won. So I haven't looked into all of them. People had sent me some different cases, but once I pursued a different direction, but earlier on that was important. So,
yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm going to keep throughout this. I know a lot of folks are talking about ways that we can do it, but for me, the answer still remains, let's let this play out, but let's also just remember that we don't need them. right? That we can do really cool things as a community, and we can show the way that it could work. And that might be more powerful to them than anything, is seeing us pull together in a way that we are more successful than they would have expected. And all of a sudden they're realizing they've picked the wrong horse in the race, and the investors are going, they seem to have figured it out. Why did you have so much trouble? Right.
I don't know. They already kind of stand apart in the gaming community because, for instance, they're not at Gen Con, and I forget what all that was, but it's not like they show up. So, and there was apparently a thing there, and I don't know what it is, other than I know there was apparently a thing. You might know more about that than I do, but it's not. They already in that situation because of whatever kerfluffle and things like that. They already stand apart anyway from most of the rest of the gaming community that plays well together.
Yeah. And you know what? So I can't stay too much longer. So the thing that I want to push is that buy your local D&D club a copy of Savage Worlds. Buy go to the summer program at the high school and run Pathfinder. Go and run these other games. Expose these kids to it, because the reality is that we're the reason. All of us hardcore gamers who have been gaming since like 7th grade ourselves, we're the ones who teach. People don't just pick up the box set and start learning to play D&D very often. More often someone teaches them. So let's teach them different games. Let's just do it. Let's build new games. Let's teach them different games. Cipher system is another one someone said. Absolutely. And I think we have the power to change this conversation in a way that doesn't necessarily involve the legal issues around the license. I think we have the power to change it because we built the story around this hobby, and we have the power to change the narrative. And that's what I really believe in, right? So,
and I agree. And from the creative perspective, I hope so our philosophy around here on the channel is to be constructive. I want to have a constructive place. I do not want to have a negative place.
Yeah.
I hope that even these conversations, I hope that this conversation, all of our conversations that have taken place on this important topic have been constructive. And that these have been useful to the community and brought new information to light, because I don't even want to run these as just hate fests or negative or whatever. I want constructive information. When there's a situation like this, we got to talk about it, but doing it in a constructive way.
Yes. Yeah.
I hope that everyone in the community has found that helpful, and that they have found that I've hit that goal. That has been my goal with these kinds of conversations. But man, I am also looking forward. Well,
no, I'm just saying, absolutely, you're right. We can't ignore that this has happened. We can't ignore looking at the license. What you're doing tonight is important. We have to do it. We have to understand what's happening. All I'm saying is I just want to, the message I want to be able to get out to the community is that let's understand it. Let's look what happened. Mainly, I want to look at it to avoid doing the same thing in the future. Whatever we build going forward, I don't want us to make the same mistakes that led to where we are today, that caused so much grief and trouble for everyone. Let's just build it in a way that we can learn from these mistakes. And we only are going to learn if we do what you're doing right now. So thank you for doing all of these, because they matter a lot to us learning that.
You're welcome, and thank you for being here. That's why I put that out. That I've been putting this out so that the community can learn and understand what the issues are, perhaps topically in the clipped things and things like that, so that but by raising our education level on all of these things. Because I mean, and you guys have all in the chat have helped me too, because you brought up things in the Discord and things like that. When I made a mistake in one of the interpretations of things like that, we've corrected that in the dialogue. So I mean, it's been back and forth, and I think we're all better for that. And I think the gaming community is going to be better if we have this education and knowledge and awareness going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to have to drop off, but thank you for having me on this tonight. And thanks for doing this. And thanks to everybody who took part and talked and listened. I've been watching these comments and great stuff there. So
check out
we'll
Cool Name RPG. Soon. Yeah,
pardon me.
Check out the Cool Name RPG. Check out Cool Name RPG. I was going to ask you one question. Was that has Paizo reached out to you at all about orc, or do you know anything? Have you been working?
I got my note. I got my response today. I signed up to be part of the push to build orc, because orc may prove to be a great license for us to give away our game with. And I just got my email from them today with the link to the Discord, and I'm on there now. So, talking to them about it. So we'll see how it works out.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here, Marc.
Yep. Talk to you later.
Thank you so much. Marc is a great guy. Is a great guy. There is still some more that I want to talk about, but I'm going to take a look at the comments here too. Thank you all for being here. I hope this has been a great conversation. I want to look at especially the virtual tabletop. I don't know what else to say in here. Well, there are a few other things I want to say on the license, but I do want to look at the virtual tabletop policy. I'm going to scroll down a little bit closer to current with the comments and see what everybody's saying. People are talking about Critical Role. I see. Yeah, I have no idea what is going on with Critical Role. After their statement, which didn't give us a whole lot to go on. See, that's what I think. I have no idea. But what James Dolph says, Critical Role is just between a rock and a hard place. I have no idea, but that would be my guess. I feel like I would hate to be them. Like, I mean, of course, I want them to stand with all of the creators and everybody on the 1.0A side, but it's not happy. We got a call from Marc Borg. We've looked at Marc Borg. We've looked at Marc Borg on the channel. Easy D6. I was also a fan of Easy D6. Easy D6 on the morning grind. We did a one on Easy D6. Call of Cthulhu. We're looking at in the morning. We're going to be unboxing the Call of Cthulhu starter box tomorrow morning. And Cypher we have not looked at yet, but I want to. That's on the list. So yeah, and the people, if you haven't looked at the index card RPG, ICRPG, people have been big fans of that one around here. So there is so much going on here. Z4RK says, have you seen that Germany's biggest tabletop RPG publisher, Ulysses, the Dark Eye, will join Orc? They will ensure that Orc will also work under German law. I have not seen that. But I have heard about this Dark Eye a lot recently. That's come up because I was not familiar with it. So that is, yeah, Open DnD says Marc is a good leader. Yeah, so I love what Marc created with the World of Ataltus. We've checked that out on the channel. So there's information if you want to go through the books. I love his magic system. I love the races that he created. And a lot of people in the comments also did and part of the community. So we're really like what he has created. And I'm really interested in following what he creates with the Cool Name RPG. Of course, we do RPG making on Tuesdays. So I've been making an RPG on Tuesdays before all of this started. So we do RPG making, but I'm planning on following what's going on with Black Flag and Cool Name RPG here on the channel. So, Trey G says that Cypher is a near perfect game system. That means a lot coming from Trey. Trey, if you haven't seen in the Discord server, he is like our third-party RPG god. He knows them all. It seems like. So let's go back over here. There's some things I want to say, and I've got a few other notes around here. Let me see what my notes are here. Okay, so there are a few other things I want to say. We can go through it together here. So this is not long. I guess I'll just read and then come up as we have here. So Open Game License Content 1.2. This is a license between Wizards of the Coast, LLC, Wizards Us, We Our, and anyone who wants to use the licensed content for their own tabletop RPG. Your. By using our licensed content, you agree to the terms of this license. As used in this license, we, or any terms referring to us, include our affiliates, successors, and predecessors. This is really important because I put the note down here. Do you know what this isn't? This is not an open license. Okay, now if you've studied philosophy or you've been in philosophy classes or done taxonomy classes or taxonomy or ontology classes, you know that just because you have the proper name of something, as in a proper noun, doesn't actually tell you necessarily at all what that object is. So just because this calls itself an open game license does not mean that it is an open license, right? When we went through Bob Tarantino's dissertation, he talked about what criteria you have to have in order to have an open license. And this license does not fit the criteria of an open license, right? And there are a few different reasons for that. I'm not going to all of them all, but this is not an open license. This is very explicitly what it tells you right there. This is a license between Wizards of the Coast and then another person who wants to use this, or entity that wants to use this. Ryan Dancity was very clear. That's a very big distinction. Okay, because that's another reason why this is not an update to the open gaming license. This is another major argument as to why this is not an update to the open gaming license, because this one is not an open license. You can't update an open license with a non-open license. I mean, then it becomes a completely different category of entity. The open gaming license was not a license for Dungeons and Dragons. Ryan was very clear on that, because anybody can use the open gaming license, like we were just seeing Black Hack. That's not connected with Dungeons and Dragons. Fate can also be licensed over the 1.0A open gaming license. Fate is not connected with Dungeons and Dragons. It's another tree in the forest. The open gaming license plants all of these trees that grow up, and then there are all the branches that come off of them. So this is not an open gaming license. This is not an open license. This is a license between you and Wizards. That's a change in kind of what type of license this is. That's, to me, another major reason why this cannot be an update to an open gaming license. Not at all. And I haven't seen people talk about that. I've seen people go, oh, this is not an open license. It is. But what is the ramifications of that? Licensed content. So now, instead of because Ryan was saying that we've got to give this license to the world, it can't just be used to license D&D. This has got to become the main license, and ideally the only license that is used for all tabletop gaming publishers for their RPGs, so that all of our content, all of the expressions of our mechanics can be used and interchanged and swapped around and remixed, right? That was the purpose, because that we see what happens if everybody is trying to license under different things. That would get rid of this. Okay, but licensed content. So instead of having the product identity and then the open content, we now have licensed content, our unlicensed content, and your content. So content covered, our licensed content. This license covers any content in the SRD 5.1 or any subsequent version of the SRD that we release under this license. So it does say that right there, but that does not guarantee that any future edition of the SRD will be released under this license. That is not licensed to you under Creative Commons. You may use that content in your own works on the terms of this license. Our unlicensed content. Only our licensed content is licensed under this license. All other content we release or have released is not licensed to you under this license. Then your content, this is your creative contribution to your works that are not our licensed content or our unlicensed content. The license permits you to combine your content with our licensed content and distribute the working results working as an authorized by this license. See, this license only applies to printed media and static electronic files, such as EPUBs and PDFs. But like we pointed out, not all PDFs have to be static. That's a weird example right there. You create for use as a tabletop role-playing game supplements and in virtual tabletops in accordance with our virtual tabletop policy, which I'm not a fan of. Your licensed works. To be a licensed work under this license, it must be covered as a covered work as defined in Section 1B, contain both our licensed content and your content, and not contain any licensed content. This is not an open license. Copyrights. We are only licensing to you our copyrights in our licensed content, except that under Section 5A, we also grant you a trademark license to the Creator Products Badge. See, they're trying to combine two things here, which are better separate. The OGL for the SRD, and then this new badge thing, which is better off as another license. That worked extremely well for the D20 logo, as Ryan Dancy has explained. Now we're trying to bring those together under one thing and also confuse the previous license, an irrevocable, undeauthorizable license, with this new license. But you got to follow the style guide and whatever else. So license. We're going to go through this pretty quickly, but I want to go through it in case there's something else that comes up, because I do want to talk about the legal jurisdiction of this, and then we'll talk about the tabletop side of things. I'll go to the end of the page, then I'll go back to the comments. So license. In consideration for your compliance with this license, you may copy, use, modify, and distribute our licensed content around the world as part of your licensed works. This license is perpetual, meaning that it has no set end date, non-exclusive, meaning that we may offer our licenses to our licensed content or our unlicensed content under any conditions we choose, and irrevocable. See, it doesn't help that this extremely restrictive, or this much more restrictive non-open license is irrevocable. That doesn't help. When we were talking about adding irrevocability, we were talking about adding that to a 1.0B that is identical to 1.0A, except for the addition of irrevocable. So I know from a PR standpoint, they're trying to say, hey, this one says irrevocable. Yeah, but it's completely different terms, meaning that content licensed under this license can never be withdrawn from the license. It can also be modified except for the attribution provisions of Section 5 and Section 9A. It can also be modified, it cannot be modified except for the attribute provisions of Section 5 and Section 9A regarding notices. So what you own, your licensed works are yours. They may not be copied or used without your permission. So this is coming back a bit on that extremely draconian license that they were talking about earlier, or in 1.1. You acknowledge that we and our licensees, as content creators ourselves, might independently come up with similar content similar to something you create. If you have a claim that we breached this provision or that one of our licensees did in connection with the content they licensed from us, any such claim will be brought only as a lawsuit for breach of contract and only for monetary damages. You expressly agree that money damages are an adequate remedy for such a breach and that you will not seek or be entitled to injunctive relief. B, in any such lawsuit, you must show that we knowingly and intentionally copied your licensed work. Access and substantial similarity will not be enough to provide a breach of Section 3. My understanding there is that that's much more standard language. I've heard people talk about that today, so I don't know, but when I've heard other people talking about that this afternoon, that appears to be much more standard language. Is that your understanding as well? It seems to be certainly much better than the draconian language that had come before, because that doesn't imply that they can just run off with your stuff and publish it under their own. So Stephen Paul for a $4.99 super chat. Thank you very much, Stephen. I really appreciate it. The VTT section is where the really crazy stuff is. No rush. Yeah, it is. I definitely want to talk about that, but we might as well. We're trying to move through methodically. Well, and some of this stuff is, I think, rather boilerplate. But okay, 4 says what we own. We own our licensed content and we reserve all rights not expressly granted in this license. 5, you control your content. You can make your content available under any terms you choose, but you may not change the terms under which we make our licensed content available. A, you must clearly indicate that your licensed work contains our licensed. See, I wonder if that, I talked to Bob Tarantino about, can you license material under a open license, under a new license, under a different license? And he said yes. He said yes. Now, it still has to be available under the open license. That wouldn't change. I'm going to clip that out. Expect that clip tomorrow, because I was surprised by that, but that seems to be good news. So that seems to be what they're trying to stop here, because this is not an open license. But when you're working at this from an open license perspective, that seems to make complete sense, that here's some open content that's available under this license. I can take the open content and I can make it available under a new license. Now, I still have to also make it available under the original open license. That can't go away, but I can make it available under something else as well. And, Fate is available under both the Creative Commons and the 1.0A. So I thought that was a very interesting turn of events. So that's in that Bob Tarantino interview, and it'll be clipped out by tomorrow. Dear Miss Loner says, WotC about VTT. You can make VTT, just don't make it better than ours. That's true. And I know also that you differ on the AIDM. I've seen your AIDM comments. I wasn't trying to make a statement on whether or not I think AIDMs are good. I'm just saying that they're coming. Some people want them, some people were not. And I know that that Dermis here is against them. But I was just saying that they're coming. So you must clearly indicate that your licensed work contains our licensed content under this license, either by including the full text of this license in your licensed work or by applying the Creator Products badge in compliance with the then current style guides. So that's an or. Okay, so the badge does imply the license. If you don't want to use it, then I guess you have to put the license in. So there we go. You may permit the use of your content on any terms that you want. However, if any license you offer to your licensed work is different from the terms of this license, you must include the licensed work, the attribution for our licensed content found in the preamble to the application SRD, and make it clear that our licensed content included in your licensed work is made available on the terms of this license. So warranties and disclaimers. Okay, so age and capacity to be bound. You are over the age of majority, and if younger, you've had your parent or guardian review these terms on your behalf. Authority. You have the power and authority to enter into this license and perform its obligations. No infringement. Your licensed works do not and will not infringe on any third party's intellectual property rights or any of our rights not licensed to you via this license or any other. No endorsement. See, except as expressly otherwise expressly allowed by this license, you will not state, suggest, or imply that your licensed work is endorsed or associated by us. And if it's not endorsed or associated with us, then why do we have to be the morality police? That seems to be the easy part, right? No illegal conduct. You will not violate the law in any way relating to this license or your licensed works. No hateful content or conduct. You will not include content in your licensed works that is harmful, discriminatory, illegal, obscene, or harassing, or engage in any conduct that is harmful, discriminatory, illegal, obscene, or harassing. We have the sole right to decide what content is hateful, and you covenant that you will not contest such determination via any suit or legal action. Of course, we've talked about that seemingly extensively here as well today, what that means and why that's an issue. Modification or termination. Modification. We may only modify the provisions of this license identifying the attribution required under. We may only modify the provisions of this license. So it can be modified. This would be a change, in my opinion, like a change of a license. To identifying the attribution required under Section 5 and the notice provision of Section 9A. We may not modify any other provision. So how do we terminate this? B, termination. We may immediately terminate your license if you infringe on any of our intellectual property, bringing an action challenging our ownership of our licensed content, trademarks, or patents, violate any law in relation to your activities under this license, or violate Section 6F. What was 6F? Oh, no, 6F? 6F is, no hateful content or conduct. So that's right there. So that's grounds for termination. We may terminate your license if you breach any other terms in this license and do not cure that breach within 30 days notice of that breach. Disclaimer of warranties and limitations of liability. You understand and agree that we are providing the licensed content as is and make no representation or warranty of any kind concerning your use of this licensed content, except as expressly stated in this license. We disclaim all warranties, express, implied, statutory, or otherwise. You bear all risk of using the licensed content, and as such, it's solely your discretion and risk. We have no liability to you for any damages in connection with your use of our licensed content, including without limitation any indirect, consequential, special, punitive, or exemplary damages, so long as our conduct at issue was not grossly negligent or intentional. I think that's rather standard language too. I think it is. So we get here to miscellaneous, and then we are into the Wizards tabletop policy. And the governing law and jurisdiction, I know I've got commentary on. Let me go to the comments for a minute. Oh, Vampire the Masquerade. I've got to look at that one too. DM's Toolbox. What it comes down to is nothing in this license matters because they still want to unauthorize 1.0A, which they know they cannot do. And that goes back to, it's a good time to remind that. But this was an important part of that I said in the beginning. We need to separate this out about the status of 1.0A, because that's its own thing, and that's our line in the sand. A completely separate issue is whether or not this new license, this closed license for additional 6th edition material or whatever, and the use of this trademark for creators' content that I don't like anyway, it's a completely separate issue as to whether or not you want to sign that. Between you and your lawyer or whatever, when you're trying to start a business. For some people, the answer might be yes. For other people, the answer might be no. For some people, if the value of the creator's badge is so great that you're going to think you're going to make enough, so much money because you're going to have the ampersand on there, which is what they're banking on, of course, Wizards, right? That, well, people are going to want that on there and make it look official, even though it implies creator content. I don't like that at all. But if you think that, hey, if I'm able to put that on my book and I'm able to access this material, I'm willing to sign up on this license, well, then, that's your decision. That's your business decision. Some people will say yes, some people will say no, but those are two separate things. as long as 1.0a stands, which we completely believe that it does here and have argued that it does, you're right that nothing in this license matters because you don't have to sign up to it. You can just ignore it, right? And they can go on and do whatever else they want with 6th edition. It's absolutely the case. Okay, so, Joe says no injunctive relief is kind of a red flag. Okay, thank you. It means they can just drag out the court case while still profiting off your content. Okay, thank you. So we do have a red flag in here. So no injunctive relief is kind of a red flag. It means they can just drag out the court case while still profiting on your content. Okay, thank you, Joe. See, that's another reason that you may not want to sign it. I mean, that seems like a reason that you may not want to sign it. Kyle Schaefer, good to see you. They want to scare you. I don't think they actually want it to go to court because they could lose, which could be bad for Wizards of the Coast. Yep. Okay, so let's go over here to the miscellaneous sections. Notices, we may notify you by email or physical address we can locate for you. Only if we cannot locate your email or physical address after a reasonable search, notice via public channel is sufficient. You may provide us with notice of your email address or physical address or any other notice by emailing oglnotices@wizards.com. So that's because we're not having to register anymore. Because the 1.1 draft had like registration in it. So that registration part's gone. Entire license, entire agreement, and disclaimer of reliance. This license governs your use of our licensed content. This license consists only of the terms expressly included herein and not any matter not expressly included herein. In accepting this license, you represent and warrant to us that you have relied only on the terms of this license and advice of your own counsel, if any. You have not relied on anything that's not expressly a part of this license. No waiver of rights. If we fail to exercise any right we have under this license, that failure will not prevent us from exercising that right in the future. Severability. I thought this is different, I believe, than you typically see severability clauses, as far as I am aware. If any part of this license is held to be unenforceable or invalid for any reasons, Wizards may declare the entire license void, either as between it and the party that obtained the ruling or in its entirety. Unless Wizards elects to do so, the balance of this license will be enforced as if that part which is unenforceable or invalid did not exist. So ordinarily, that's what you see. That, okay, if some part of this is held to be unenforceable, that doesn't affect the rest of it. But I think it's interesting that they say that if any of this is held to be unenforceable or invalid, in any one particular court with a party, they can scrap the entire license, which is not something that an open license would have, right? So governing law, jurisdiction, class action waiver. This is something that Ryan Dancy talked about. This license and all, this is important because this goes as to why this is not an open license. This license and all matters relating to its interpretation and enforcement will be governed by the laws of the state of Washington, and any dispute arising out of or relating to this license will be resolved solely and exclusive. Well, hold on, we got to get to that point. But this point right here, that this one does have a geographic jurisdiction. And we asked Ryan Dancy specifically about that. Because why isn't there a geographic jurisdiction on the open gaming license? And his answer in retrospect is obvious. He said, because it's not a license for Wizards of the Coast material or Dungeons and Dragons or anything like that. Anybody could be operating under the OGL. And so any parties that might have some type of legal dispute under the OGL might be in any arbitrary location. You know, it could be, because I had been thinking when I was thinking about the legal jurisdiction of the OGL, that Wizards would always be a party to that suit or that court case, whatever. But that's not the case at all. Under the OGL, all of a sudden, some company in France could have a problem with something that somebody is doing in Bolivia. And it doesn't make sense that the laws, they would have to go to Washington in order to resolve a dispute. He was saying the law has ways of figuring out what jurisdiction is going to resolve that. And some jurisdictions claim universal jurisdiction anyway. So it's not like, so if somebody went to court over the OGL, they're not necessarily going to be involved with Wizards. It could be any two arbitrary entities in any arbitrary locations. That's why there's no, because it's an open license like that, there is no geographic jurisdiction of the OGL. But here, this is a closed license. It is not an open license. And so any dispute here would be with Wizards. And so they say this license and all matters relating to it will be governed by the states of Washington, because Wizards would be a party in this. Okay. And any disputes arising out of or relating to this license will be resolved solely and exclusively through individual litigation in the state or federal courts located in the county in which Wizards or any successor has in its headquarters, and the parties expressly consent to the jurisdiction of such courts. Each party hereto irrevocably waives the right to participate in the class, collective, or other joint action with respect to such a dispute. Red flag, right? See, if we were evaluating this on should we sign this, like everybody's going to have their own opinion and everybody's business situation is going to be different. Maybe it is, but, you know, not being able to participate in a class action lawsuit is kind of a big deal. Waiving your right to participate in any class action, collective, or other joint action with respect to a dispute, that would be a huge red flag to me. You know, maybe the value would be worth it. Maybe if what they're offering is so worth it, then it would be. But like, that's a huge red flag. I wouldn't be for that. Let's see. Heading and footnotes. The headings, and then I'll go to the comments here. The headings and footnotes contained in this license are for reference and purposes only and shall not affect in any way the meaning or interpretation of this license. I think that's pretty standard. This one seems to be a red flag. Waiver of jury trial. We and you each waive the right to a jury trial of any dispute, claim, or cause of any real action related to or arising out of this license. What lawyer would have you sign that, would recommend that you sign that? I mean, if you're negotiating a license with somebody or some kind of contract, waiving your right to a jury trial seems like something that a lawyer would say, oh, no, hold on, wait a minute, don't sign that. Let's take this out of this contract. Again, that to me, that seems like one of these red flags here that's like, gee, I don't know if I would. Marc said that he did not think, in his opinion, that this license was one that you could build a business under. The open license of 1.0A was definitely a license that people did, and had great success building businesses under. Everybody benefited. In his opinion, he said, I think he said this earlier and said this to me, that it did not appear that you could effectively build a business under this license. Review by counsel. You should seek advice of counsel to make sure you understand this license. You agree that you had the opportunity to do so. You know, so you can't claim ignorance either. All right, let's go to the virtual tabletop policy after we go to the chat here. I'd be interested to know what people who know about the legal language. Hopefully you've got your glass of wine or whatever it is you've got here. Let's see. Yeah, Access Your Inner Light says, yep, I won't be using this license or anything like it until they get rid of the morality, hateful content clauses. Lots of people talking about the morality element of this and the hateful and discriminatory content. Son of Fleer Floff says, so far in this, they haven't said anything about anything in this about 1.0A, so don't sign and keep using 1.0A. We think it stands. Cranky Elder God says, if I declare that I hate OGL 1.2, is that hot, hateful content? I think that's funny. Derma says, if WotC said that we make a GSL, which is the GSL was the type of license that 4E was under, for 6E or 1 DnD, they might not burn to the ground anything. Yeah, if they just separated, that would be so easy. They could do it. They've been hostile to the 1.0A in the past, but they didn't think they could do this. They could deauthorize it then. But that's fine. If they don't want to be under it, just go on. Just go on. Let's see. Yeah, the more people are going to be abandoning D&D, and I'm still waiting for the side of the Geekverse that does movies and games. Movies, well, games, movies, and TVs to get a hold of this, especially if the boycotting the movie starts to trend. If people start to boycott that. Yeah, I hear you. This is regarding the AI. I know. I'm not saying that. Yeah, I can argue for it or against it, but I think it's coming. Okay, let's see. Right, exactly. Cranky Elder God says that jurisdiction statement is actually fairly common for business licenses when you're trying to control it. When you're trying to control where this dispute would arise, you put that in, but it's not for open ones. So we learned that. So exactly right. And also, Cranky Elder God says the waiver of class action clause is a major red flag. It would be to me too. I mean, it is to me. It is to me. Ratton God says, I have an appointment with a copyright lawyer on Tuesday. I'll be taking this draft with me as part of the discussion. Would love to know what you have to say. All right. Let's go. Let's take a look at this because this is not going to work. The virtual tabletop policy version 1.0. And I think most people know what they're trying to get at here. But they say, as gamers and big fans of VTTs, we are announcing this new VTT policy as part of the rollout of OGL 1.2. Why does Wizards need a VTT policy? We support the role VTTs play in the tabletop space. The ability to game remotely means more people can game, and it's wonderful that people thousands of miles apart can share a space as though sitting around a table. But as VTTs advance, their functionality will raise tricky questions. Where's the line between a VTT and a video game? I mean, good question. When does a VTT become more than just a replacement for the traditional tabletop? These questions require thoughtful answers. Well, good questions. Answering them will take time, and we want this policy to reflect your input. So we'll be asking for feedback and talking to you about our goals as this discussion advances and new technology emerges. What is permitted under this policy? Using VTTs to replicate the experience of sitting around the table playing D&D with your friends. That's pretty limiting. So displaying static SRD content is fine, just because it's like looking at a source book. You can put the text of Magic Missile up on your VTT and use it to calculate and apply damage to your target. And automating Magic Missile's damage to replace manually rolling and calculating is also fine. The VTT can apply Magic Missile's 1d4 damage automatically to your target's hit points. You do not have to manually calculate and track the damage. Okay, but here's what isn't permitted. What isn't permitted are features that don't replicate your dining room table storytelling. If you replicate your imagination with an animation of the Magic Missile streaking across the board to strike your target, or your VTT integrates our content into an NFT, NFTs keep coming up. That's not the tabletop experience. That's more like a video game. So anything that doesn't replicate your dining room table, I mean, that's pretty restrictive, right? I mean, I've heard that there were some people who were doing some things like, hey, I'm going to replicate Magic Missile with like some fireworks or something at my dining room table. How about that? And also, I'm thinking about the Knights of the Dinner Table, where BA brings a flamethrower to the table to replicate the fireball. So I'm thinking about things like that. Stephen Paul, thank you very much for the super chat. $1.99 super chat. Stephen asks, can Bob return for OGL 1.2 review? He was great. I can ask. I know he's very busy and he's got a lot going on. I mean, he's an entertainment attorney. I understand working at a pretty high-powered firm. So I understand in Toronto. So I don't know his availability. We can ask, and I'll see that if he would like to, I can ask. I would certainly be happy to have him back on. And also Ryan as well. I'd be happy to have Ryan and either of them back anytime they would want to come. So I'll ask, but we will see. Yeah, I know. It's not like this can't change, right? Well, and also, I mean, they can update this. This isn't something that is anything that is set in stone. I mean, they can update their dinner table. Yeah, my dining room table has magic missile animation. Now, I am thinking about that. Now, that's interesting too, because 3333 says, because we built that TV for Lou. Now, well, this is an interesting thing. We built that TV case for Lou, which is actually my most watched YouTube video, where we built that large case for a TV that sits on our table. And when he uses animated maps and things like that. So we are sitting around a table and there are animated maps and sound effects and things like that coming from that. So that's a good point. There are animations and things like that on that. Right. No, exactly. No purple streak animations to visualize a spell. But, you know, if you agree to this, I mean, maybe I think that's right. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but if for some reason you agree to this license, well, you're saying that you're not. I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I know what NFTs are, and I understand what they are and all of that. But like, why all of a sudden NFT was dropped right there, I don't know. See, that's more like a video game, but you know what they're going to have. I mean, that's what they want. They want to be sure that if they're making their money off of the virtual stuff and all the digital stuff, they want to be sure that only they have this, that's where all of the general population comes and goes, oh man, this is so cool. If you want the coolness, you got to be subscribed to them. You know, that's where this is going. You know, that's exactly it. May I make my VTT Owlbear token look like the one from the Monster Manual? No, we've never licensed visual depictions of our content under the OGL, which is true. There's been no image. Now, actually, Marc has been thinking about if the cool name RPG goes well enough, he was like, you know, why couldn't we license the art as well under an open gaming license? So that, yeah, if you want to use the official owlbear or goblin illustration or whatever, why not? There's no reason that you couldn't do that. You couldn't put that under an open gaming license. And Marc has been talking about that. But it's true that the visual depictions have never been licensed under the OGL, just the text of the SRD. That hasn't changed. You can create a creature called an owlbear with the stat block from the SRD. You cannot copy any of our owlbear depictions. But if you've drawn your own unique owlbear or something else, or someone else did, you can use it. What about OGL 1.0a? Does this policy apply to that? Yes, you can upload your already licensed content to a VTT. I own or operate a VTT. How does this affect me? If you are a VTT owner or operator who supports OGL products on your platform, you have the same obligations for VTT content that any website owner or operator has for copyrighted content under the DMCA. So they're coming after the people who run these things. You say this is a conversation. Does that mean this policy can change? Yes, we need your feedback as the tabletop space evolves. The potential of VTTs is tremendous and exciting, and we don't want to harm. We don't want to harm their development. I don't believe that for a second. Yeah, that was an issue. I mean, that's one of the things of the open license, the open gaming license, that your categories are not restricted. Ryan was very clear on that the category of use was not restricted. So that brings us to the end here. I'm going to look at comments here for just a few more minutes and so we can see what people think about this. But we did come to the end. I hope it was a great conversation. Yeah, the tabletop simulator. Hey, Robert, good to see you. Nephenor says, this is a direct attack on Foundry VTT, which allows for animation mods to replicate the fireball streaking across the screen. I've started looking at Foundry VTT when everybody was recommending it. It looks really cool. Right. That's Derma says that targeting all VTTs that gives the animated option because WotC wants D&D Beyond to be the one VTT platform for D&D and it to be the one with all the cool animations. So you think they're gonna use NFTs? If you want D&D NFTs as part of their virtual tabletop or digital business, I mean, it could be. It could be. And it could be too. Nimitz 2009 says, let me guess, to get the animations in their future VTT, it will be a microtransaction. It could be. It could be. DM Toolbox says, I can use a 3D printed spell effect with LED lights. That's more realistic. The spell cards. Yeah, I've heard something about spell cards that were animated. Then there were the holographic animated spell cards, or something about animated spell cards with somebody. Right, exactly. Severin says 1.0a allows you to do a video game. Just flat out. If you want to do a video game, you can do a video game, right? There was no restrictions on categories. You still had to follow the terms of the license, but as long as you follow the terms of the license, hey, make a video game. C3 L7IC says, I was a developer making a game with WotC about 8 years ago now. They weren't like this before Hasbro. They said, well, Hasbro's been around for longer than that, but Hasbro may have taken notice more recently. That said, VTTs are legally video games, which means all the games are in breach of this. Let's see. So Captain Nolan says that OGL 1.2 is a terrible license. So as long as 1.8 we can continue under 1.0a, hey, we don't want to be forced. You can't force us into it. Cranky Elder God says, and for 99 cents, you can re-roll that critical failure. Let's see. All right. Well, I hope this was a beneficial conversation. Tomorrow morning, we're going to be unboxing the Call of Cthulhu. I'm really excited. I want to get back to creating things. We're constructive. We're creating things on this channel. We've got worlds to build. I'm building 2 different worlds. We're doing an RPG. We like painting. I canceled the painting stream because I was clipping things, clipping videos out. On Sundays, we typically paint miniatures. I'm looking forward to painting miniatures again. Tomorrow night, let's do a watch party of The Cultist Season 1 and Season 2. The Cultist is our scripted comedy show. It's a comedy web show about Lovecraftian cultists who just want to worship Cthulhu in a world full of people who don't understand. If you haven't seen The Cultists, it's a mockumentary that we did, and there's 2 seasons on YouTube now, but we've never done a watch party where we watched Season 1 and Season 2 completely back to back. So I'm thinking that tomorrow night, I need to chill. So I think that we'll just watch that together, do a watch party. So come by, watch the comedy. Be with me tomorrow morning. We're going to unbox Call of Cthulhu box set, learn how to play. Saturday, I do the morning grind every morning at 9:30, including the weekends. I got a game of a Hero Quest this Saturday. So Saturday afternoon, I'll be doing that. But I think that's where we're going. Hopefully, we can still reflect on this. We'll keep the conversation public, but then also we can send in our private reviews on D&D Beyond, but keep the conversation public. But anyway, we got things to make. We got things to do. I got to get to bed because we got to be up in the morning for the morning grind and answer the call to adventure. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being here. Loved being here with you. Enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.